Carolyn Wright, Chair of the School Board of Virginia Beach, and I hereby call this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. on this 13th day of September 2022. We welcome all the members of the public here with us in person this evening, and as always, others are able to observe this meeting through live streaming on vbschools.com, broadcast on VBTV Channel 47, and on Zoom. So with that, Madam Clerk, would you please announce those school board members in attendance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those present in school board chambers are Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Felton, Ms. Franklin, Ms. Holtz, Ms. Owens, Ms. Riggs, and Ms. Weems. And entering the chamber now is Ms. Hughes.
Thank you. And Mrs. Manning has noted to me that she is attending another event this evening. So that brings us now to asking everyone to join me here, please, for a moment of silence. Please stand as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So that brings us to the recognition part of the program, and I'm turning the agenda over to Vice Chair Mrs. Melnick.
This evening, the school board has the pleasure of recognizing division students, teams, and staff who have been awarded or recognized during state, multi-state, or national competitions or events. But tonight, we are honoring our Office of Purchasing Services. We have one honoree this evening, and we'd like to recognize them and welcome them to Virginia Beach City Public Schools. This valuable part of our division recently received the Achievement of Excellence in Procurement distinction from the National Procurement Institute. This award recognizes organizational excellence in public and nonprofit procurement. The award criteria are designed to measure innovation, professionalism, e-procurement, productivity, and leadership attributes of the procurement's function. Congratulations to the talented team in purchasing. We are so proud of you.
All right, agenda item 8, agenda adoption. Are there any modifications to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, a motion to approve. Mrs. Franklin and a second, Mrs. Riggs. All in favor, show a raised hand, please.
Madam Chair, we have 10 ayes. The motion did pass.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That brings us to the monthly, no, this is not the time for the superintendent report. So we will move ahead to the approval of the meeting minutes from the August 23rd regular school board meeting. Are there any modifications to these minutes? Okay, hearing none, a motion to approve. Mrs. Felton, a second. Mrs. Hughes, all in favor, show a raised hand, please.
Madam Chair, we have 10 ayes. The motion did pass.
Thank you. So now on to the public comment portion of the meeting. The school board will now hear public comments on matters relevant to pre-K to 12 public education in Virginia Beach and the business of the school board and school division. from citizens and delegations who signed up with the school board clerk prior to noon today. The school board, as always, invites the public to submit comments through our group email account, which can be found on our website. So with that, Madam Clerk, I'm asking you to introduce the first speaker of the evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our first speakers will be student speakers. We have Biona Jefferson, Zenobia Lachey Carnari, and Jayla Delaney.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Biana Jefferson. I'm from Princess Anne High School. I'm a 12th grader, and we would like to talk about the cell phone policy. I think the cell phone policy is a very important role in the classroom, especially when used effectively. They are very beneficial to students and allow them to pull out their phones for various classrooms activities and learn. And students learn in a way that is comfortable for them. Smartphones are where teens can find peace. They can listen to music and get their work done and not be distracted by what's going on around them. We just set up a change.org, and one of our comments under our petition is, I understand that the school board think we use our phones too much, and that's okay. But they should not ban phones in Virginia Beach City Public School District. Many of us mainly use our phones to listen to music during independent work because it helps us focus. I feel that the school board should let the teachers decide if they want phones or not. No phones while the teachers is teaching, but if you finish all your work or you're working on independent work, then we should be allowed to use our phones. Am I allowed to step up? Or there you go. That's our petition. It's still growing as we speak right now. We done made over, before 24 hours, that we was already at 500 before 24 hours, and as we speak right now, we're still at 1,300 something, 1,300. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Zenobia Lachey Carney. Jayla Delaney, speaker number 4, had to cancel, and then it'll be Michelle Hill.
Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Zenobia Carney, and we got some comments from students from Bayside, which is also the school I attend. I am signing this because I need my phone and AirPods to play music so I don't get distracted. I have ADD, and it helps me focus. I'm signing this because it's unfair. People who submitted their assignments and done with all their work are just sitting there with nothing to do and just watching the teacher or the walls.
Our next speaker is Jayla Delaney, then Michelle Hill, then Gregory Batts.
Welcome.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jayla Delaney, and I attend Bayside High School. Today, I wanted to talk the recent banning of phones. I feel though it's completely unfair for us students to have no say in this policy. After all, we do attend schools every day. It feels that we are getting punished for something, and if so, what do we do? It's one thing to take away our phones, but it's another to do with no explanation. We are young adults that want to be treated as such and not just as some little kids. So I was thinking if we wanted to be treated like adults, let's act like it. And what will adults do? Use their voices for what they believe in. So me and my friends started a petition against the phone policy, a petition with over 1,000+ signatures where many students get to voice their say on this ban. And let me ask you guys, what is the difference between VPCPS and Renaissance right now? Because that's how students are feeling right now. Like we're in trouble. Like for example, in my school, we can't eat in the cafeteria. Our lunches are color-coded like kindergarteners. We have to sit in our classes with no electronic devices, period. And also for Lansdowne and Green Run, I've heard that they can't have their phones in the cafeteria either. I'm a senior in high school, and all I wanted was for this school year to be great, but it's far from that. I couldn't even take first day photos with my friends, which I haven't seen all summer. And I completely understand that some students have ruined things, but that does not reflect all Virginia Beach. I struggle with severe anxiety, and I'm surprised I'm even up here right now. But I know for a fact that listening to music during independent work calms my nerves, helps with my fidgeting and zoning out 100%. It's actually scientifically proven that music tends to help students focus on writing and working. Also, the no phone policy is actually doing the complete opposite of its purpose. The teachers are spending more time enforcing the rule than actually teaching. And the funny thing is, phones weren't even a problem last year. I mean, it's pretty ironic that 2020 through 2021, we relied on our phones heavily due to COVID and students got their work done. What's the difference now? It's 2022, and I feel like phones aren't just a distraction, but it's a part of a necessity in society today. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Michelle Hill, then Gregory Batts.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Michelle Hill, and I'm a student at Bayside High School. I would like to speak about the recent phone policy. I feel as though students were blindsided by this decision. After all, it was just last school year that we had access to our phones, and now this privilege has been stripped away. As someone who deeply cares about their education, I completely acknowledge the importance of being present and engaging in the lesson. However, students who are engaged should not have to suffer because other students refuse to pay attention. Students are outraged and don't understand how this policy is helping anyone when all it has done the past few days is cause more distraction. The policy was created that so phones would become less of a distraction, but so far it has caused more distraction than when phones were allowed. Teachers are having to stop their lesson to reprimand students, which defeats the purpose. While I completely understand putting the cell phone up when the teacher is talking, I don't understand why students should be forced to stay off their phone when their work is completed. They've done everything they're supposed to do, and yet they have to stare off into space. I have thought about this issue carefully, and I ask that you please consider allowing students to use their phone if they have been verified by their teacher that all their work is completed. I also ask that you allow teachers to make their own decisions about phones in the classroom, as what works for one person might not work for the other. I strongly believe that teachers are capable of deciding what is appropriate in their classroom regarding cell phone use. If a teacher sets their own rules, students are more likely to be receptive. Teachers could come up with their own ideas on what they think is appropriate cell phone use. An example of this would be allowing students to have non-instructional time where they're allowed on their device. It's as simple as putting your devices up during instruction and bringing them out again when all work is finished. This, of course, would be determined by the teacher and what they feel their class can handle. I truly believe that these updates to the phone policy can make all the difference. They would they would allow students to feel less constricted while also allowing teachers to set boundaries that would work for them. While this type of adjustment, teachers would be able to show students the importance of knowing when technology should be used and when it shouldn't be. Thank you.
And student speaker number 6 had to cancel, so we will move on to Vincent Smith, Heather Comer, and Tanya Rivers.
Good evening.
Evening. I won't take much of your time tonight. I just came to speak in support of item 15C. There's 3 reasons why I support this resolution. First, it makes it very clear that the school board supports that parents are first and foremost in the children's lives. I support it because it does not say that government is an equal partner. And I also support it because it has a very clear list of positive common sense actions that are going to be taken. It's a very clear and easy to read resolution. It makes sense. I urge you to support it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Heather Comer, then Tanya Rivers, then Lisa Varga.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Ms. Melnick, school board members, and Dr. Spence. My name is Heather Comer, and I grew up in Virginia Beach. I attended schools at VBCPS, as did my husband and my kids. I've been teaching at Virginia Beach for 27 years. This is my 3rd meeting in a row. Currently, I teach English 11 and a 4x4, and I have 150 students on my roster. In my 27 years in VB, I've taught 4,100 students, approximately. In the next 3 years, I'll teach 450 students. And in the 10 years where my pay will not increase, I will teach an additional 1,500 students. From year 30 to year 40, I have the same pay each year. It won't increase on the pay scale. It will stagnate. Yet I will teach 1,500 more students in my career. Teacher retention is a hot topic, and veteran teachers are leaving between the ages of 50 to 60, with 25 years of experience at a higher rate. Could they be enticed to stay in Virginia Beach? I think the answer is yes. VBCPS could add years to the pay scale to acknowledge years of experience. Over my 27 years of teaching, I've heard many seasoned teachers voice frustration over the stagnant pay scale after 30 years. As a 20-something teacher, I really didn't get it. At 27 years of teaching, I get it. I have a lot of years left in my career, and that my pay will be stagnant from year 30 and beyond. Some will say leaving VBCPS isn't about the money, but when teachers are leaving after 20 plus years and going to Chesapeake, it might be about the money. Chesapeake's pay scale continues to increase from year 30 to year 40, yet Virginia Beach's does not. VBCPS sees no pay scale increase from year 30 and beyond. Our most experienced teachers are leaving and going to a neighboring district. The pay increase stopped at 30 years, and yet my teaching career will continue. As a teacher, I will continue to empower students. I will continue to attend VBCPS-sponsored professional development. I will continue to grow as a teacher, yet my paycheck will freeze and stagnate. What message is VBCPS sending about the value of seasoned teachers? What message is VBCPS sending to teachers who, like me, start teaching in their early 20s?
30 seconds.
I'm asking the board and Dr. Spence to revisit the 30-plus scale and add years for all the teachers who started teaching in their 20s and made Virginia Beach City Public Schools a career and want to stay teaching in Virginia Beach. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tanya Rivers, then Lisa Varga, then Heidi Dragneff.
And just a respectful reminder to everyone to refrain from any level of applause. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm a parent of 2 VBCPS elementary school students. I'm a kindergarten teacher, run a garden and culinary club, was School Volunteer of the Year, and served on the gifted CAC. I see what goes on in the classroom and is nothing like what's being depicted by those who are criticizing hardworking teachers. If you are so concerned with what's going on in the classroom, go and volunteer. Do not send out threatening emails with false information to teachers and library staff talking about retribution if certain books are in schools. Many schools need literacy tutors. Instead of complaining about what books are being read, go help students read. Students need access to all kinds of books. Students need to be represented in the pages that they are reading. The resolution that Ms. Hughes is proposing is one of privilege. It is assuming that all parents have the best interest of students in mind. Many VBCPS students come from environments which they are not able to speak freely, ask questions, or seek information. Schools and school libraries are a safe haven that allows these students to seek the information that they need. This resolution proposes that every book that is checked out is emailed to be vetted by parents. This creates fear in some students. The library that was once a safe place is now a place of fear. Fear of retaliation from a parent if the wrong book is checked out. This is not okay. Libraries should never be a place of fear. They should be a place of hope and opportunity, a chance to take a break from reality and dream, a place to gain answers to questions that they have. Not every student has access to books outside of school hours. Not every student has reliable transportation to get to public libraries. Not every student has the money to purchase books from a store. School libraries are essential. Library media specialists are highly trained individuals that help students find the right fit book. Why can't we trust them to do the job they are hired to do? As far as classroom reading is concerned, we already have an opt-out policy. We should not have to opt in every student for the class for every reading. This would add to the workload of our already overburdened teachers. Every time a book is read or assigned, they would have to have a permission slip to make sure that every student has turned in one before they can read a book. Again, this policy assumes that every student comes from a household with an adult who would oversee this. This is just not the case. I know a first-year English teacher who is afraid to add books to her classroom shelf in fear of retaliation. This is what policies like this are doing. It's driving teachers away. I know firsthand how important libraries are. I come from a background of instability.
30 seconds.
I understand how important it is to find a book with a depiction of what you went through, of what your childhood history was. That's essential. We already have opt-out policies in place. We do not also need to have an opt-in policy when a very small percentage of parents are restricting access to certain books. Just because you do not want your child to read those books does not mean you get to take that right away from others. Please vote no to this resolution. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lisa Varga, then Heidi Dragneff, then Quinn Sipes.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Superintendent Spence and members of the school board for giving me time to speak today. I would like to address my comments directly to Ms. Manning and those who align with her. I'm very sorry she isn't here today. Your exaggerations are doing real damage. No one who has gotten up here to speak in defense of books or educators or librarians is defending pornography or grooming or indoctrination. You are using books to manipulate your audience into following you down a dangerous road. According to a March 2022 survey by Hart Research Associates and North Star Opinion Research, 67% of voters oppose efforts to remove books from school libraries. Ms. Manning, since you seem to like to declare that taxpayers don't want their money spent on 1 or 2 or 12 or however many books you've decided are your enemy, let me say as a taxpayer, I don't want you continuing to waste my time or anyone else's time. In fact, I'd like to bill you for the hours you've spent turning these meetings into a circus, the time you spent spreading misinformation, exaggeration, and outright lies on your bizarre number of Facebook groups. As a taxpayer, I would like for you to pay us back for every hour any educator, librarian, principal, school board member, and parent has had to spend on your claims. I have here an invoice for $400,000, which is a rough estimate, but there might be a mathematician or math teacher in the room who can better help me with percentages and estimates. I know when to ask an expert. I will not stop. I will not stop. You said that at the last meeting of the school board. In my opinion, you said that as well. As a taxpayer, I do not trust your opinion. Your opinion does not represent the large majority of people who care about the education of their children, and they may not show up here and speak up because they are people who are managing family and jobs and their lives, and they can't cater to the circus you create because you are gratified by likes on your Facebook page. You have chosen the wrong battle here, and I will not stop showing up here to tell you how wrong you are. I will not stop.
Our next speaker is Heidi Dragneff, then Quinn Sipes, then Melissa Luxon. We will move on to Quinn Sipes.
Good evening.
Good evening. Before I get into the reason for my attendance at this meeting, I'd like to thank Dr. Spence for what he did at the last school board meeting. Dr. Spence sent a clear message to his staff that we are valued and that the work we are doing to shape the future generation of this city and this country is appreciated. I'd also like to thank the various school board members that also stood by us educators at the last school board meeting. When I chose to leave my previous career to work within this district, the same school district that I graduated from, I came so that I could shape our future. I did not come to this district to be disrespected and called names by parents, community members, and school board members for teaching our children. I find it unsettling that some board members think that my job is to indoctrinate students and expose them to obscene literature. My job is and has always been to expose my students to literature that allows them to see their own reflection in the reflection of their peers. I not only chose literature that is on the VBCPS approved supplemental novel list, I chose literature that demands that my students grow and learn about things that they have not been exposed to before. In my class, it may be a student's first time reading about the church bombings in Birmingham, Alabama during the 1960s, and not just how atrocious that was, but what it's like being attacked because of the color of your skin. In my class, a student may know how hard of a journey it has been for them to be where they are now, but it may be the first time they get to see themselves as beautiful because they beat the odds and were able to grow from concrete. In my class, we discuss moral and ethical questions that push us to do more than identify what figurative language devices are used by the author. It pushes us to have empathy for one another and to respect how far each of us has come to be in this classroom. Whether we like to admit it or not, some of our students are facing challenges that we cannot even fathom. And these books that continue to get pulled show our students that they are not the only ones facing these challenges. While the approved VBCPS supplemental novel list is not currently under fire, school library books are. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of my students. I'm speaking on behalf of the students that feel like their very existence is considered controversial. My students are in the development stages where they are figuring out their identities, including but not limited to who they are in regards to their race, ethnicity, gender, and who they love. The books that have been challenged so far by community members and school board members target students that identify as LGBTQ+ and BIPOC. Every book that gets pulled from our schools and school libraries limits the ability for students to see themselves and their classmates. Every time a book gets pulled, those students are told you're not worthy to be talked about. Every time a book gets pulled, those students are learn to hate themselves because they're told you're not normal. School is supposed to allow for the exploration of self in a safe environment. I implore you to keep books on our shelves that promote diversity in our schools along the basis
And
of
that is
race,
time.
ethnicity, and gender.
Our next speaker is Melissa Luxon, Jeanette Gagoski, and then Sarah Gerloff.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening to school board members and Dr. Spence. Ms. Hughes and Ms. Manning and their Political Action Committee, Students First Virginia, believe stoking parental rage can be mined for electoral gold. Make no mistake, this is about the children, but not for the reason that you think. This fight against books, teachers, librarians, and other parents is nothing more than an anti-diversity campaign led by mostly white women. I call them the 2022 version of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. It is a multifaceted and well-financed effort to force a cultural shift from the bottom up to rewrite history, recenter whiteness, and protect and secure the benefits of social inequality. Anti-diversity is the focus, and this parental rights movement is just history repeating itself. There was a parental rights movement in the 90s, once referred to as the Parents' Revolt. Republicans rallied around the Christian conservative movement in an attempt to increase political favor, reinvigorate the right, and dismantle the public education system. Conservative parents were up in arms over the rise in secularism, comprehensive sex education, and what they perceived as the erosion of the traditional nuclear family. Their only solution was a fight back against public schools by strengthening parental rights. Does this sound familiar? We will fight back against this form of censorship. You will not restrict what students are allowed to learn and what teachers are allowed to teach. We have unstable people emailing school librarians, stoking fear and concern of retribution, which seems to be moving towards parents using grievances as grounds for lawsuits against individuals because their other bullying tactics haven't worked to get what they want. The resolution presented by Ms. Hughes has me questioning her skills as a lawyer. For starters, the code section of the law she is using to base her resolution on was enacted by the General Assembly in 2013 due to Virginia Supreme Court decision to protect the parental rights of an unmarried sperm donor. It wasn't changed to weaponize school administrators and educators. On item 1, preventing schools from enforcing policies which will make healthcare decisions for students contrary to the will of their parents. Do you realize that your glittering generalities are in direct conflict with state law for student immunizations, Ms. Hughes?
30
An
seconds.
opt-in policy for classroom reading assignments, under my interpretation, I would be able to disapprove of any book that a teacher has in their lesson plan as required reading. Any book. I can decide what I don't want my child reading, no matter the basis, because this basis is not laid out in the resolution. It's up for interpretation. So a select few parents can screw up an entire lesson plan for a teacher and a whole class of students because these kind of helicopter authoritarian parents are terrified to have an age-appropriate conversation with
And that
their
is
kids.
time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jeanette Gagoski, then Sarah Gerloff, and Paula Chang. We will move on to Sarah Gerloff.
Good evening.
Good evening. I've been listening to some of the teachers that have come down here to speak about their low salaries. I am in agreement that teachers are not being paid enough to keep up with administration's demands and the ever-increasing cost of living due to the inflation being created by politicians. I found salary information listed on Virginia Beach City Public Schools website. Standard teachers start around $52,000 and the increase to a pay of about $75,000 over 30 years of teaching. I have noticed a huge increase in administrative staff over the last 20 years. According to research, administrative staff has increased 88%. Principals and assistant principals are up 37%, while the increase in teachers and students is only 8%. So basically appears the majority of tax revenue has been going into the hands of administrators. The following is a list of a few examples of salaries for administrators that can be found on your website. Sustainability officer, starting at $76,000, going up to $112,000. Coordinator, school community partnerships, starts at $82,000 and goes up to $120,000. Director of Safe Schools, starts at $88,000 and goes up to $128,000. Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion starts out at $94,000 and goes up to $137,000. And of course, let's not forget that you just voted to reward the porn-pushing Aaron Spence with a raise, which inches his salary ever closer to $300,000. Have I mentioned before that the transfer and distribution of obscene material is a federal crime, which means that Spence is a criminal? As administration has increased, the quality of our children's education has decreased. A teacher friend of mine told me she has kids in her 6th grade class that had not been taught to read. Why are these kids being passed to the next grade if they cannot read? Children cannot learn without being able to read. This trend shows the growth of big government. As big government grows, taxes on people grow. Control over the people grows. Education on our children goes down. This is what happens in a communist country. I have been observing the actions and behaviors of this board for over a year. Actions tell a lot about an individual's content and character. School board members should always follow the supreme law by protecting the people's unalienable rights when making decisions. You should put children's education first, which also means looking out for our teachers. The majority of you vote with no regard to God's supreme law of the land, and you put your own interests first. You vote your opinion or the perceived opinions of your constituents without considering real law. The majority of you on this board are here for the wrong reasons, and it's to satisfy your own ego.
That is time. Our next speaker is Paula Chang. Speaker number 11 will be going virtual, then Erica Guess, and then Keely Arnold.
Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm here this evening to tell the tale of 2 resolutions regarding parents and their rights over children in the school system. The first is by Laura Hughes, is entitled Parents' Right Resolution, is completely based on Virginia Code 1240.1, stating, quote, that a parent has a fundamental right to make decisions concerning the upbringing, education, and care of the parent's child. The second resolution, because I was a little bit late, I honestly have to say I don't actually know if it was put forth, but it was written by Vice Chair Melnick, in which, unlike Laura Hughes, she never once mentions parental rights and titles it to be to support and empower families. Wrong, Ms. Melnick. It actually empowers the school board, the administration, and government over the roles of children in control of decision-making. Melnick ignores Code 1-240.1, stating instead that the school board shall provide opportunities for parents and community involvement. No, Chair Melnick, you do not empower parents. We are all born with unalienable rights. You and your board do not decide what powers and support you will grant to us. You work for us. Regarding medical rights, Mrs. Hughes states that neither the board nor Virginia Beach City Public Schools will create or enforce policies, regulations, or practices which make healthcare decisions for students contrary to the will of their parents. In stark contrast, Vice Chair Melnick's resolution states the opposite, never once mentioning parental decisions in the medical care of their own children, but instead says, and this is a quote, Virginia Beach City Public Schools will continue to collaborate with community-based healthcare providers to respond to students' immediate physical and mental health care needs and ensure a continuity of care. Wow. She appears to indicate that they could vax your child, could medicate, provide hormone therapy, and continue these therapies because it states it in your resolution. Laura Hughes' resolution requires opt-in for some books and email notification of library materials. Ms. Melnick, yours doesn't address the concerns that parents have had about some of the library materials. You do, however, state that the Virginia Beach City Public Schools instead will continue to uplift and support social emotional learning. So, which means that we can have the transgender policies, you can continue
30
testing
seconds.
children and reporting on the testing to organizations. Let me just finish up. Ms. Vice Chair Melnick, you wrote this document which strips parents and students of the strength of their family, replacing families with governmental authority and mutual parenting. Last year, you so desired to keep a racially divisive book in our school system that you claimed that it was the hill that you would die on. Are you, I ask, and all board members who might support your resolution, should it go
And that is
forth,
time.
claim the same about themselves and this
Our
document?
next speaker is Erica Guess, then Keely Arnold, and then speaker number 5 is here, so that the last speaker will be Heidi Dragneff.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Erica Guess, and I have 2 children in Virginia Beach Middle Schools. You may be familiar with the book Goodnight Moon, which was written by Margaret Wise Brown in 1947 and has become a children's classic. You may have read it to your own children, but what you may not know is that it was excluded from the New York Public Library for 25 years. That's because the head children's librarian, Anne Carroll Moore, did not like the book and thought it would degrade young minds. She was a pioneer for children's libraries and arguably did important work on behalf of children, but Moore's taste favored authors like Beatrix Potter and Hans Christian Andersen, so she worked diligently to keep Goodnight Moon off the shelves of her library. Because she was so influential in children's literature, many other libraries also excluded the book throughout the country. We now know that books in the style of Goodnight Moon, with simple language and colorful illustrations, can help developing readers. Anne Carroll Moore disagreed, and the book was only added to the library catalog in 1972, a decade after she died. Like Anne Carroll Moore, there are people in our community and outside of our community who would like to restrict the books my children can access in school libraries. To that end, it was brought to my attention by school board member Jessica Owens that a person has sent intimidating emails to individual staff warning them to remove books from our libraries, citing legal misinformation and warning of, quote, retribution. As a citizen of Virginia Beach, I am outraged that staff members are being targeted. As a parent, I am terrified. Zealotry is dangerous for our community. When teachers are threatened, we must also wonder about the safety and well-being of the students around them. For those of you who might assert that these emails are harmless, it's important to remember that if you don't have a student in our public schools, these ideas may seem abstract to you, but to people like myself and Ms. Owens, both of whom have students enrolled in our public schools, this feels real. I don't know the person who sent these emails, and I don't know how dangerous they may or may not be. So I invite elected school board members and school administrators to publicly denounce
30 seconds.
these intimidations of our staff, to denounce these individuals or groups sending these messages, and to support our library staff. Not doing so sends a message to students, parents, and staff that you're willing to risk the safety and security of our schools in favor of politics. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Keely Arnold, and then Heidi Dragneff.
Good evening.
Good evening. I wasn't going to talk about books today because I talked about that last time I was here. But I will make a few comments. I've seen a lot of these books. They are pornographic. Definition, you can look it up all day long, and it often says sexually explicit, which is what the majority of the school board likes to use as the word for pornographic instead. Now, these books, several have been removed, and they are just disgusting, really. So I want to get off that subject because I have a lot of other things to say, and I don't want to run out of time. So the majority of this school board is completely out of touch to what parents want for their children. I'm not sure why many of you on the school board continually try to supersede parental rights. About the 2 different resolutions from the school board members, one from Laurel Hughes and one from Kim Melnick. It's easy to see that one supports parental rights and the other takes them away. Laura Hughes' resolution supports parental rights by the law. A parent has the fundamental right to make decisions concerning the education, upbringing, and care of the parent's child. This right is of great importance, especially in concern to controversial issues and medical decisions. In Laura's resolution, parents keep the right to control matters concerning controversial issues, and they keep the rights to control their children's medical decisions. School Board Vice Chair Kim Melnick drafted a resolution that opposes and weakens parental rights. This resolution strengthens school board and administration powers on important decisions for our children. It is not this school board's role to arrange my child's health care, his health providers, or his mental health needs. This is for me, the parent, to do. I do not give away to you my right, my legal right as a parent, to make such vital decisions for my child. Kim Melnick's resolution also supports the very divisive teachings of social emotional learning. I cannot support such teachings which cause conflict and discord.
30 seconds.
Parents are disgusted by these decisions of school board members who often take part in continuing policies that weaken and subvert our parental rights. It is up to the parents to make decisions concerning the upbringing of their children, not the school board. The school board is supposed to serve the people who elected them. Vote and support Laura's resolution. This is what the majority of parents want and what the majority of the community wants as well. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Heidi Dragneff.
Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to go. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of our school staff, teachers, and our superintendent. Thank you. You guys have endured so much over the last 3 years, and you deserve a standing ovation. You really do. I want nothing more than for teachers to have the freedom to teach and for kids to have the freedom to learn, no matter how hard or uncomfortable something is. What I don't want is to have a small group of people strip those freedoms away from our teachers and students in public schools. I'd also like to say thank you to the Students First crew for bringing these books to our attention, because without that, our kids would have never known any of them existed, and that inspired us all to go out and buy them and let our kids read them. The process of teaching a person or group to accept a particular set of beliefs uncritically is the definition of indoctrination. And that's exactly what Student First aims to do. They want to remove any and all materials that make them question their thoughts, opinions, and perspectives because it makes them feel a little uncomfy. They don't want their kids taught about racism, even though our history is filled with it. For example, slavery may have ended, but resentment, hateful rhetoric, and the treatment of Black people never has. They don't want their kids reading books that offer differing views on what families look like because they think that's what turns a person gay. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. You can't prevent a person from being gay just like you can't prevent a person from being straight. Our First Amendment right guarantees us freedom of religion. This includes freedom from religion. We already have private religious schools that they are free to send their kids to. I refuse to stand by and allow them to tear down our public schools to enforce their personal beliefs onto the rest of the community. They aren't the majority. They're just the loudest and most obnoxious. We have 11 school board members, and only 2 of them agree with the Student First agenda. That's not a majority. And it's always the exact same group of people that show up to these meetings, repeating themselves over and over and over again. They stir things up online constantly. It's destroying our community. It's causing undue stress.
30 seconds.
They don't stand for the Constitution. They stand for themselves and their small worldviews. What they want isn't freedom. It's quite literally the opposite. The freedom they want is the freedom to force their ideals on the rest of us. This isn't about freedom. It's about control. And we won't let them have it. If they don't like the public schools, they can take their kids elsewhere, and they can leave the rest of us alone. Thank you.
We are now going to move on to our online speakers. Our first speaker is Melinda Rogers. Please unmute.
Good evening.
My name is Melinda Rogers, and I am the parent of 3 Virginia Beach City Public School students and a former teacher with Virginia Beach City Public Schools. I am here tonight to impress upon the board the importance of authentic staff input. I want to emphasize the word authentic because, in my experience, the staff cannot share their thoughts and experiences with the division to improve their working conditions. On January 25th, 2022, I spoke virtually at the school board meeting regarding the changes in the masking policy. I wrote a speech that highlighted the specific changes that were happening in the classrooms across the division due to the policy change. I had been a regular speaker at the board meetings up until that evening because I thought it was important for the board to hear from teachers who were actually working in the classrooms. Within 15 hours, Dr. Robertson was in my classroom. After his visit, that afternoon, I was summoned to my principal's office. He showed me that he had been forwarded a video of my speech from the board meeting by the division. He then stated he was required to inform me that the Department of Teaching and Learning needed to come and look at my classroom for, quote, not following division directives, unquote. Even though I was following directives listed on the VBCPS website, and I had weekly visits from my department ensuring that I was, in fact, following those directives. I did not speak at a board meeting for the rest of the school year. It was in part due to the stress of the situation and the division response that encouraged me to find employment elsewhere for this current school year. However, I know this was not an isolated incident. The same protocol has occurred over and over within the division, whereby a staff member speaks at a board meeting or emails a board member, and that communication is forwarded to the staff member's principal. The principal is then asked to have a discussion with the staff member, sometimes to include a visit from the Department of Teaching and Learning in an act of pure intimidation. There can be no authentic input from staff if this continues to be a regular occurrence. The board should be looking into emails throughout the division to see the number of times this has occurred in the last few years. I know it will not be just me. At this point, the number one responsibility of this board should be staff retention. With all due respect to what's been transpiring this evening, I don't care what books are in any of our libraries if there aren't going to be any librarians to open the libraries anyway. I don't care if there's cursive being taught if we can't even get a teacher to teach the curriculum. I don't care what policies are passed if there's no staff left to enforce the policies anyway. There are students in VBCPS schools right now having to have core classes taught asynchronously because there isn't enough staff to fill those positions. We should be doing everything we can to protect our staff from leaving. From now on, I am pledging to bring staff stories to the board's attention. I will do it safely and anonymously, and I encourage staff members to reach out to me. I am not here to point fingers and say everything the division is doing is wrong, but it's high time for self-reflection on the part of this board and the school division. There are real problems that need immediate attention, and it is staff retention that we have to focus on. I will fight for our staff because I want.
And that is time.
Feel free to follow up with your additional remaining comments, Ms. Rogers.
Our next speaker is Zachary Coltrane. Please unmute.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Spence and the school board. My name is Zach Coltrane, and I'm a recent alumni of Strawbridge Elementary School, Princess Anne Middle School, and the Legal Studies Academy at First Colonial High School. And I represent VBCPS currently as the youngest candidate in state history to file for the House of Delegates in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I cite my time and supportive staff in VBCPS as to where I get my advocacy abilities and where I get my desire to represent my district. I come here virtually from my university to speak to you all. And I'm going to take the rest of my proposed time to break down the parental rights resolution bit by bit, to start with the following, quote, whereas the single most important indicator of student success is parental involvement, end quote. When I began looking at research of the National PTA and the National Coalition for Parent Involvement in Education, the findings had me convinced that there was nothing wrong with that proposed statement from the resolution, until you apply the slightest bit of context, something that I've had from the past 13 years of my life in the VBCPS system and the past 2 years in higher education. I can tell you firsthand as a student that this is a logical fallacy. Passing legislation that cements the importance and priority of parental involvement disregards any and all students whose parents can't make that commitment to education. The very purpose of education in public school systems is that we can have a place where everyone is granted an opportunity to learn, regardless of background, class, status, or what your parents can contribute to the education. Singling out students whose parents can't prioritize their children's education standards at all times is a sad but true result of some of the economic disparity issues within our community, and this is not addressing them properly. Shifting into the resolving action of the resolution, point B asks that all schools require a signature before any book is distributed in class. Looking at how many issues have arisen in my school career, from permission slips for field trips, federal cards, and beginning of the year paperwork stacks, teachers do not need this extra work. Students don't need the extra responsibility, and parents do not need the reason to be a student losing educational value from their teacher in classroom because a piece of paper gets left behind in a backpack. This plan is not practical. Point 3, Virginia Beach City Public Schools shall develop a system where parents receive an email when their students check out a book from the library. The email will contain a link to websites where parents can vet the books checked out. Oh boy. Without rehashing the fact that no one needs or wants this that actually shows up to class each and every day, I want to highlight the absolute necessity of protecting students wanting to learn about personal and academic resources. Students who read a book about being queer or wanting to ski makes no difference.
30
I
seconds.
came out at the age of 12 because my school made me feel comfortable enough to discover and display that about myself. I, in middle school, was able to tell people who I was, and I was proud of it. And I know that now, in a world where this resolution passes, people won't, don't, and will never have that luxury. Forcing students into situations that can compromise their quality of life dramatically just because their school system outed them with an email. This resolution creates a scenario guaranteed. This situation does nothing to better education for students. It creates a logical nightmare for obstacles. It's risks safety for vulnerable students.
And that is time.
Feel free to follow up with email remarks. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Suzanne Saltesiak. Please unmute.
Welcome.
Hello. I feel necessary to actually qualify that I am a parent here. I have kids in VBCPS, for those that don't know. I'll start off with Franklin D. Roosevelt said, I have an unshaken conviction that democracy can never be undermined if we maintain our library resources and a national intelligence capable of utilizing them. In other words, when we try to ban books and intimidate librarians, we lose a core element of democracy. Yet over the past few weeks, we've seen a dramatic escalation in threats to the jobs and safety of librarians and administrators due to the outrage over books on the shelves of our school libraries. Now, instead of taking advantage of numerous processes that allow parents of VBCPS students to monitor which books their child reads, they've taken the outrage on our hardworking library staff and even gone so far as to threaten librarians with arrest or lawsuits if someone objects to certain books being on the shelf. That means thousands of your tax dollars would be spent on incarcerating librarians because someone doesn't like a book. Being a taxpayer does not grant you special privileges over students, staff, and parents. I do not want random people with no education background or experience determining what books my child can read and what curriculum they learn. Just because you get up at every meeting and rant and rave does not give you authority over my child's education. This attempt to weaponize parental rights is not about parental rights. And Ms. Chang, like the majority of people raging about this, you are not parents in our system. These are people that have decided they get to claim parental rights over our children to try and intimidate the schools into following their beliefs. Ms. Chang, Ms. Gerloff, Mr. Smith, you do not get to parent my kids. And Ms. Kelly, I am a parent and a member of the community, and I am disgusted by your desire to remove my rights and my children's access to books that reflect themselves. Extremists have tried to use the courts to restrict my family's rights, and now that the suit was dismissed, we have another person without children in the system trying to intimidate our staff into following their supreme law from God to force their ideals on us. We do not need a resolution to try to redefine parental rights that are already codified in our Virginia laws, especially one that is vague and micromanaging. We do not need our highly trained staff micromanaged by the masses. I want the school nurse deciding if Donnie who's throwing up at the desk next to my son's needs to go home, not his mom who wants to finish her hair appointment. We do need to have staff and librarians and educators to teach our children, and we need them safe from retribution from random citizens who want to parent my kids. And so what we also need now is voters in school board elections and in these next elections. The most important thing you can do is vote, paying special attention to candidates' views on intellectual freedom at all levels of the ballot, from school board on up. Voting starts November 23rd at the Municipal Center, and it goes at locations throughout the city.
And that is time. And Madam Chair, that was our last speaker for this evening.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, and all our speakers. And now we are at agenda item 12, information. We have a series of presentations this evening, and we begin with the budget calendar with Ms. Crystal Pate, Chief Financial Officer, as our presenter.
Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chairwoman Melnick, school board members, and Dr. Spence. This evening, I'm presenting the budget calendar for fiscal year 2023-24 school operating budget and the fiscal year 2023-24 through 2028-29 capital improvement program. The calendar contains the specific dates and timeframes for the key components and activities of the budget development process. It is an important guide for administration and the school board regarding the schedule and the events in the budget process, which will ultimately result in an approval of a proposed budget. I just want to point out several of the key dates on the calendar. Tentatively, on November 15th, we will be joining the city budget staff in presenting a 5-year forecast in a joint briefing to the school board and city council. December 13th is scheduled to be our first public hearing on the budget to solicit stakeholder input for consideration of priorities to focus on in the budget development process. There will be no document available at that time. This is a preliminary public hearing just to hear ideas and themes of what the public would like to see addressed in the budget for fiscal year 23-24 or the 6-year capital improvement program. During the latter part of January, we will be sharing the recommended school operating budget and capital improvement program with the superintendent and the PPMC. And then on February 7th, that begins the process for the school board. This will be a special school board meeting where we will be presenting the superintendent's estimate of needs and the superintendent's proposed capital improvement plan. Every Tuesday after February 7th, the school board will have a budget workshop, and on March 7th, at your discretion, you will have you can have another workshop, but also on this date, you are scheduled to approve the operating budget and capital improvement program. We will then send the approved budget to the city. We will have a presentation to City Council sometime in April, and that date is yet to be determined by the city. And by state code, City Council must approve the budget by May 15th. And that concludes the presentation of the budget calendar, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
So to be clear, this is a typical timeline from the past, just to point that out to the public.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll give my colleagues a moment, but they all have the benefit of having this in advance, so Dr. Spence.
Yeah, also just a reminder that, although it's not in the calendar, we will continue to work with the PPMC to solicit input from the board prior to presenting the superintendent's estimate of needs.
Thank you. All right then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Information item B, Standards of Learning, otherwise known as SOL, student performance, and we begin with Ms. Tracy Legata. Hello.
I guess the red light means it's on. All right. Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the board, Dr. Spence. I am Tracy Legata, Director of Student Assessment from the Office of Planning, Innovation, and Accountability. This evening, I will present Virginia's 21-22 annual pass rate data for Virginia Beach City Public Schools. This presentation will examine 21-22 pass rates compared to pre-pandemic rates. This presentation will also include state pass rates and the pass rates for other Virginia divisions. And after viewing the data, Dr. Rogers, our Chief Academic Officer, will address the great work that is taking place across the division to address areas of focus. As a reminder, the Virginia Department of Education annually releases pass rates that are published on their website and as part of the school quality profiles that they publish. These rates are not calculated based on the rules for state accreditation, which means they do not include growth and other adjustments. Before I present these data, I think it's important to remember the challenges our schools and students have faced since March 2020. The impact of the school closure on student learning for all students cannot be overstated. Evidence from across the country suggests that while all students experienced some learning loss in 2021 during the 2021 school year, the pandemic had a disproportionate effect on students living in poverty, students with disabilities, and English language learners. Not only were students and staff working virtually for many months, many students and teachers missed several days of school in 2021 and in 21-22 due to illness and/or quarantine. Some classrooms were staffed with substitutes for several days in a row. We know that it will take some time to fully reach the level of performance observed prior to the pandemic. Despite these challenges, there is much to celebrate with respect to the division's performance on SOL assessments. Our staff and our students have been working very hard, and you will see the impact of their work in today's pass rate review. Although pass rates are not up to 18-19 levels across the board, they are up from last year and are moving in the right direction. Our performance also exceeds pass rates at the state level, and we fare favorably when compared to other comparable and/or local school divisions. But you don't have to take my word for it. We are going to dive into the data, and we are going to start with pass rate data by test. The table on the screen displays SOL pass rates in mathematics. The leftmost column of the table lists the name of the test. Next, the pass rate. Next are the pass rates for the 18-19 school year, which are pre-pandemic pass rates. The table has a placeholder for the 19-20 year as a visual reminder that the assessments were canceled by the state. And the table also includes pass rate information for the 2021 school year, despite the lower participation rates, and should be interpreted with caution. Approximately 65% of Virginia Beach City Public School students who were eligible to participate in SOL testing in 2021 participated. Participation rates varied by student subgroup, with smaller percentages of Black and economically disadvantaged students participating in testing that year of 2021. Next, you'll see our most recent pass rate of data for the school year 21-22. The mathematics pass rates for 21-22 ranged from 45% in grade 7 math to 93% in algebra 2. It is important to note that only about half of grade 7 students participate in the grade 7 math SOL test. The others take either the grade 8 or algebra 1 SOL test because those are the courses for which they are enrolled in. The next column represents changes in pass rates from 18-19 pre-pandemic to the pass rates from 2021. As you can see, in almost all areas, pass rates in 2021 were lower than pre-pandemic rates and ranged from 2 to 21 percentage points. Geometry did show a 2 percentage point increase from 18-19. The final column represents the change in pass rates from 2021 to 21-22. Keeping in mind participation was lower than a typical testing year, if we compare the last 2 years' pass rates, it shows improvement on all testing ranging from 5 to 12 percentage points. In 2021-2022, the pass rates in reading ranged from 76% in grade 3 reading to 91% in grade 11 reading. When comparing 21-22 data to 18-19, in almost all areas, pass rates were lower in 21-22. But the differences were much smaller than in math and ranged from 2 to 6 percentage points.
The grade 11 reading pass rate was 91% in both 18-19 and in 21-22, indicating no change. When comparing the last 2 years of data, pass rates show improvement in all but grade 8 reading, ranging from 1 to 8 percentage points. In writing, the grade 8 pass rate was 66%, while grade 11 was 82%, both lower than pre-pandemic. In 2021, grade 8 students did not participate in an SOL test, but instead participated in a local alternative assessment for writing, an option offered by the Virginia Department of Education for that year and that year only. And for that reason, you'll see an NA. You'll see an NA when we compare the last 2 years of data for grade 8. And there was a 3 percentage point increase in grade 11. In 21-22 for science pass rates, they ranged from 57% in chemistry to 92% in earth science. It is important to note that the Virginia Department of Education determined that starting in 18-19, students in high school would only be required to take an SOL test for courses when they needed the test for a verified credit, or if the test was required by ESSA. So for this reason, some high school SOL assessments have fewer students participating than prior to that change, when all students were required to take the SOL test if they were enrolled in a course. So division-wide, only 149 students took the chemistry SOL test in 21-22, compared to approximately 570 students in 18-19. Prior to this change in high school testing, 3,700 students participated in that assessment. So we're seeing much smaller numbers in some of our high school assessments. On all but one of the science tests, pass rates were lower than the pre-pandemic pass rates, ranging from 11 to 20 percentage points. The end of course earth science pass rate was 88% in 18-19 and increased in 21-22 to 92 percentage points, showing a 4 percentage point increase. And when comparing the last 2 years of data for science, with the exception of grade 8 science, pass rates improved on all science tests, ranging from 4 to 12 percentage points. In the area of history, pass rates in 21-22 ranged from 46% in World History 2 to 81% in grade 8 civics and economics. In 21-22, 614 students took the Virginia U.S. History SOL test compared to a little over 5,000 students in 18-19, when that high school testing change that I mentioned previously first occurred. And about 630 students took the World History 2 SOL test in 21-22 compared to 3,800 students in 18-19. Overall, all history test pass rates were lower than pre-pandemic, with differences ranging from 7 to 34. And when comparing the last 2 years of data, with the exception of grade 8 civics and economics, pass rates for all history tests improved. Improvements ranged from 4 to 12 percentage points. Next, we'll look at data by student reporting groups in the areas of math and reading. On this chart, you will see data for each reporting group in the area of mathematics. The left column of the table lists the reporting groups, and the columns that follow show the pass rates and the changes
comparing 18-19 to 21-22 and comparing the last 2 years, the same setup as we were looking at in the previous tables. When comparing reporting groups in mathematics pass rates, in 21-22, they ranged from 43% for students with disabilities to 90% for students in the Asian reporting group. The lowest pass rates were in the following groups, which were students with disabilities, English learners, and Black students. In mathematics, all reporting groups showed lower pass rates in 21-22, lower than pre-pandemic rates, and that ranged from 6 to 19 percentage points. And when comparing the last 2 years of data, pass rates showed improvement in all reporting groups ranging from 4 to 13 percentage points. And when comparing reporting groups in reading, pass rates in 21-22 ranged from 47 percentage points for English learners to 90% for students in the Asian reporting group. The lowest pass rates were also with students with disabilities, English learners, and Black students. And again, pass rates were lower than pre-pandemic. And from last year, pass rates increased, ranging from 1 to 13 percentage points. So to put all this into perspective, what I did is I went ahead and compared our pass rates to the pass rates for the state of Virginia. And we typically do this to compare and see where we stand in comparison to the state. So this table represents SOL tests that are administered in grades 3 through 8 in Virginia Beach and across the state. Each column represents the year, a year in which the data were compared. So we have 4 years of data. The number in each cell represents the difference between our division pass rate and the state pass rate from each listed test. A positive number indicates the division's pass rate was higher than the state's pass rate, and the numerical value tells you how much the difference was. So for example, in 21-22, the grade 3 reading pass rate, which you see circled, for Virginia Beach students as a group was 6 percentage points higher than the pass rate at the state level for that same year. And looking at the years of data represented on the screen, Virginia Beach exceeded the state pass rate on all grades 3 through 8 SOL tests, except for grade 7 math. And it is likely that for grade 7 math, we are not comparing apples to apples because Virginia Beach City Public Schools, as I alluded to earlier, encourages most 7th graders to take pre-algebra, and that is not a requirement across the state. So again, over half of our 7th graders are taking pre-algebra or algebra 1, and that's not a requirement, but that is something, a practice that we have in Virginia Beach. And we did the same with our end of course assessments. So here you'll see our high school tests, and Virginia Beach met or exceeded the state pass rates on all but 2 SOL tests in 21-22. And that is chemistry and world history too. So I also compared the annual pass rates for Virginia Beach to the annual pass rates for a few other comparable and local school divisions for the current year. So here is a list of some of the larger school divisions that we often compare ourselves to. So when looking at pass rates by subject, Virginia Beach City Public Schools as a group outperformed all listed comparable school divisions in reading and math, and all but one listed comparable school division in science, where Virginia Beach and Loudoun County had the same overall pass rate. And when comparing Hampton Road's 7 cities,
Virginia Beach City Public School students as a group outperformed all other cities in all subject areas except for history, where Virginia Beach City Public Schools in Chesapeake had the same overall pass rate. In addition to examining SOL pass rates by subject area for our school division and the local and comparable divisions referenced on the previous slide, we also examined performance by student group. And across the comparisons, economically disadvantaged students in Virginia Beach consistently outperformed their peers in local and comparable school divisions. The data also revealed that Hispanic students and English learners in Virginia Beach had higher pass rates in all subject areas than their peers in comparable school divisions. There were fewer instances where Black students and students with disabilities outperformed their peers from local or comparable school divisions. We did find that Black students in Virginia Beach had a higher pass rate than their peers in local school divisions in the area of reading. And in addition, our students with disabilities outperformed peers in local school divisions in the area of reading except for Chesapeake, where the pass rates were the same. So in summary, there are many bright spots when examining the SOL pass rates, and there are certainly areas that require some focus. And with respect to accomplishments, although most pass rates were lower in 21-22 than pre-pandemic, almost all of them increased from 2021. Reading pass rates remained most stable when compared to pre-pandemic. Overall, the grade 11 reading pass rate for the most recent year was the same as pre-pandemic, and geometry and earth science showed better than pre-pandemic pass rates. When reviewing all students as a group compared to students across the state, Virginia Beach continues to outperform the state on 26 out of 29 tests. We also outperformed comparable school divisions in reading and math, and outperformed local school divisions in all areas but history, where our pass rate was equivalent to one other school division. And it's important that we focus on continuous improvement in all subject areas, but there are areas requiring additional focus, specifically those listed on the slide. We are committed to improving the performance of all students, and the data and committed to improving the performance of all our students, and the data, examining all of our data and all of our student group data to ensure that we cover the needs of all of our students and focus on students with disabilities, English language learners, and our Black students. And to address our areas of need, Dr. Kip Rogers from Teaching and Learning is here to share some of the work that's going on in our schools and as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Legata.
Thank you, Mrs. Legata. Good afternoon, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, school board members, and Dr. Spence. As Mrs. Legata shared, we will continue to provide continuous improvement in all areas with a focus on math, science, and history. And this evening, I will provide you with a high-level overview of the differentiated supports that we provide to schools to ensure teachers are well prepared to continue to meet the needs of our students. We will focus our areas on response to student needs and continuous improvement to provide consistency in our messaging, as well as support to our staff, students, and families. So I'd like to share with you right now is the data show that VBCPS implemented a strong response to student need. And we clearly identified this as our focus last year and streamlined all of our professional learning in order to provide clarity and efficiency when we analyze data, plan for instruction, and taught our students. We are proud of the work that our teachers, building leaders, central support staff, and families did last year to support our students, and we look forward to the continued progress that we'll make this year. The graphic in front of you is quite familiar. You've seen it several times, and as a reminder, it's our teaching and learning framework. It emphasizes planning, teaching, and assessing, and you'll note There are 3 diamonds in between the plan, teach, and assess components. And they say respond. And again, last year our work as a division focused on the way in which we respond not only to students, but to our staff's needs. And we plan to continue to streamline that process with a strong approach on responding this year. I also want to direct your attention to what guides our work. And this should look familiar to you as well. It's our strategic action agenda, well, the top part of it. And also our Compass to 2025, strategic framework, which serves as a foundation for our work when we respond to student needs. Our strategic action agenda includes what we refer to as the big 3 and grounds our work in ensuring that we are working towards advancing and engaging opportunity for all students, which focuses on equity, ensuring that we are focusing on that Tier 1 instruction, which is the first time students are taught, emphasizing literacy and numeracy, and lastly, preparing all of our students for the future by providing them with experiences that connect with their interests as well as with their future goals. We have much to celebrate relative to growth and progress on the SOLs, and we also recognize that we do have a need to continue our work towards closing gaps and addressing learning loss, and certainly as a result of the pandemic. So holistically, I want to point out just 3 things. Generally speaking, all of our areas in our work this year will focus on professional learning, where we provide support to our administrators, to our coaches, to our teachers in all grades, and analyzing data to support individual student needs. Then secondly, the enhancements of our curriculum. We've strategically planned to ensure that all teachers have access to effective Tier 1 instruction, and we will expand on this more in one of your future meetings. Lastly, we've partnered with the Department of School Leadership to ensure that quality feedback is provided to teachers and that they receive it and it's in alignment with our professional learning focus. So what does the structure look like for support for our schools? I do want to point out that already, and it's September 13th, both Department of School Leadership and the Department of Teaching and Learning, they've already gone out to every school, looked at and had conversations about their data and talked about initial supports to begin the school year. So that work has certainly already begun. And what it looks like is we have universal support that's provided to all of our schools, and then we have differentiated support that's provided to schools based on the data that we have available. And we'll continue to look at those data. And speaking of data, I want to elaborate just a little bit on the Comprehensive Local Assessment Plan. You may remember I discussed this last year. We developed it to support all of our pre-K through 12 assessments that provide clarity and consistency with specific assessments in order to ensure that our instruction is driven by data and that we're able to monitor it at the division level and certainly at the school level so that we can adjust instruction in a timely manner. It was extremely effective for us last year. We implemented things like PALS Quick Checks, just-in-time math assessments, which are shortened math assessments provided to us by the Virginia Department of Education, as well as local common assessments that are used to determine student proficiency to drive student instruction. Holistically, relative to language arts, our response is to support growth in language arts. We have an intentional focus on professional development as well as in curriculum. What we've done this year is bolstered our focus on professional learning around literacy, and as I mentioned during the workshop, we do have another cohort of teachers who are participating in our letters training. And letters training, again, as Dr. Spence mentioned earlier, is specific to the science of reading. We are also expanding opportunities through our curriculum to highlight future-ready skills, and you'll hear us talk about that a lot this year, and we will share more information relative to that in the upcoming school board meeting. But this year, we've embedded more opportunities for our students to be able to write in the curriculum. Writing is a complete and total transfer of knowledge, and kids get the chance, the opportunity to demonstrate what they've known, what they've been taught, and what they understand is best manifested through writing. So I want to share just a few examples with you. So in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades, our students have access to writing choice boards that are embedded opportunities to write about content areas like science, and here's an example of one. That's done typically during the language arts independent block. And this does support writing as well, again, as a transfer of content knowledge. Relative to reading, you might recall this from a previous presentation last year. during a literacy update that we do provide support through the small group reading site, and this is one of the ways in which we provide support. And it houses resources, excellent resources created in-house that are organized by stage of literacy rather than by grade level. So we meet students where they are based on data. The site is a resource that ensures that our teachers have access, again, to explicit, systematic instruction that's grounded in current research, the science of reading, to develop the foundational literacy skills that our youngest learners need. Now, relative to secondary, that's not much different. To reinforce writing across the curriculum at the secondary level, secondary content teachers use the PPE model, which is point, proof, and explain for writing. The point, proof, and explain is a metacognitive process that really allows students to think about what they're thinking and transferring that knowledge from pen to paper. It's an essay writing technique that's designed to help our students construct paragraphs correctly. So, for example, the first paragraph is a point that the writer is trying to make. Next, the writer needs to provide some level of proof or evidence that what they're saying is true, so they're not just making stuff up. And this is usually in a quote that they've gotten from a book or article or some other essay that they've read in the classroom. And then finally, our students need to explain that what the quote means and how it supports the original point that they were making. So those are just a couple of examples of how we're embedding writing in the content. Our response to math holistically, again, is to focus on professional learning and curriculum. And based on the successes that we learned last year relative to math across the division, our professional learning for our math coaches will focus on assessment, data analysis, and responding to student need, not unusual. And at the elementary level, our coaches will receive turnkey presentations. And what we mean by that is our team in the Department of Teaching and Learning will actually give them what they need to turn resources over to their staff and professional development. But those turnkey presentations are based on the Virginia Department of Education rich tasks. And that's to ensure that the process standards are part of everyday instruction. There are 5 process standards that we teach our math teachers to use in the classroom to help students process math better. Now, at the secondary level, our coaches will receive training on the use of manipulatives, small group instruction in a math classroom, as well as data analysis. The curriculum does provide our students with opportunities to engage students in rich tasks that ensure that they're asked to demonstrate an understanding at the level of rigor that's intended by state standards. And it also provides them with an opportunity to use manipulatives in building their mathematical understanding. So it's a little more extensive than just answering a problem. And I'll share 2 examples for you. The first of which is an elementary example. And I do want to read this one to you because I kind of like this one. Jamal is in charge of buying prizes for the school carnival. He needs exactly 250 total prizes. What could he buy? Find at least 2 combinations of prizes that he could buy. Use pictures, numbers, and words to explain your solution. So as you see, there are lots of potential for manipulatives that kids can work either independently and or in groups to demonstrate how they would split up 250 total prizes. Here's a secondary example for an Algebra 1 class, and I'll read this one as well. This is kind of small for me. Let me see. You are planning a one-day road trip, but you don't have a car. You have investigated rental cars available from companies in the area, and you've decided to rent a car from either Prestige Auto or Gateway Auto. And in this instance, students have to plan a one-day trip, but they don't have a car. The students have an opportunity to investigate the problem at the cost for the rental car company that they decide, and then they have to complete the chart, and then they concentrate on the independent and the dependent variables, and students have an opportunity to talk about and discuss how they spend their money, all the while having to write an equation that represents the data that they've collected. So those are 2 examples of rich tasks that our math teachers will be implementing this year. And I'd be remiss without sharing that we're fortunate to have access to instructional coaches to provide support to our school based on their data. Our coaches will provide support to teachers with analysis of student work, as well as specific instructional strategies that are necessary to meet student need. And in addition to supporting teachers through professional learning communities, through collaboration, our coaches do follow the VBCPS coaching profile in order to provide individual teachers with support in order to improve their expertise in meeting the needs of their students. Our coaches were absolutely instrumental in the success of our students as well as our teachers last year in building the capacity. And we're looking forward to continuing those efforts this school year. Now, relative to science and social studies, and you saw Mrs. Legata share some information relative to that, so we do have some opportunities for improvement there. The good news is that we have a plan. So for science and social studies instruction at all levels, the focus will be on inquiry and problem solving, providing students with the actual opportunity to do science. And I was a former science teacher, and one of the things that we lacked last year, and quite honestly, is having multiple opportunities for students to be able to do science for a multitude of reasons, most of which many of students weren't in school. But this year, the expectation is that our science professional learning is planned to be focused on the scientific and engineering practices that emphasize processes and deeper understanding through design and conducting investigations. Our team is also providing layered levels of support to be able to assist teachers in allowing students to have multiple opportunities to experience and do science, with an emphasis on the instructional practice of allowing students to explore science and social studies before they explain it. So Review Pride's grade level content is embedded and connected to units and concepts and will cover science and social studies content as it naturally occurs within the context of our curriculum. And I want to share a brief example of what students may experience with the Explore Before It's Explained strategy in science and social studies. So the first example I share is through elementary. And actually this slide was used last year, so it may look a little familiar to you. So the Explore Before Explained strategy is being emphasized in both science and social studies, and it'll assist us in meeting our goals. In this example, providing a problem-based scenario and instructional sequence, like the one shown on the screen, will allow students to consider not only the weather, but also allow them to build background knowledge before the learning content. So if you remember just a couple of days ago, it was in the evening about 7 o'clock, and I live in Hampton, it was a torrential downpour, came out of nowhere. That's a prime opportunity for a teacher to capitalize on an experience that a student just experience and bring that into the classroom to explore before you explain. So this instructional sequence emphasizes students moving away from passive listening toward exploring, communicating, questioning, and creating. And this approach will best allow us to move our students toward becoming future ready because it allows them to draw from their personal experiences. I want to share a secondary social studies example. Our social studies teachers are working towards deepening skill development through content and inquiry. Professional learning and resources include a focus on equitable teaching strategies that emphasize, again, writing, questioning practices, and making thinking visible. Our 5E learning structure that secondary teachers will use extends what I just shared relative to elementary strategy, the elementary strategy of explore before explain with inquiry-based learning experiences. So for example, in one such inquiry, students are asked to ultimately answer the question, does change mean progress? And that question is connected to the content of their study of the 1920s and 1930s. So in this instance, the 5E structure could begin with engage. Students would consider the scenario of a change in health. Go figure, we just experienced a pandemic, just coming out of it. They're considering this idea of change, and it connects to something which they may have had some experience, i.e. the pandemic. As we move to the explore, which is the pink area, students would examine primary and secondary documents, images that show a particular event in the 1920s or 30s upon which the inquiry is based. In the explain component, which is that blue component there, students begin to organize their ideas and put their ideas in their own words. They should be able to talk about it. Moving toward the elaborate section, which is the purple section, students are encouraged to make connections and expand their knowledge and skills that they learn through writing. Again, the writing component as they analyze and interpret the information that they've learned. And then lastly, the evaluate component, that's ongoing. We teach teachers as part of our balanced assessment to use formative assessment to formatively assess students as they are learning. In that way, students are able to take ownership of their learning and then reflect on their understandings as teachers evaluate through a variety of assessment types. So those are a couple of examples that we have there. The other way in which we're expanding our opportunities to support our students and close some of the gaps that we have, late last year, or mid part of last year, we created the ASAP tutoring program, which encompasses all things tutoring in Virginia Beach City Public Schools, which are people, programs, students, you name it. They're part of our academic support tutoring program, and we will continue those efforts with academic support. We do have the 24/7 FEV tutor program available to students to have just-in-time tutoring whenever they need it. And then we are also continuing to partner with Tutor Ed, who provides people in our classrooms for math. We used them for math last year, and we will continue to do so this year. So what are our next steps? Our next steps of support is to closely monitor progress and ensure continued effective support. And the Department of Teaching and Learning and Department of School Leadership will meet regularly. We all have the dates calendared already to review the support that we provide, and student progress will be monitored to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our schools and students. Our comprehensive assessment plan will ensure that we're leveraging data to meet specific needs of all students, with a focus on students in underperforming reporting categories to work toward closing those achievement gaps. And as a team, we will continue to foster the best instructional practices through professional learning. I attended an excellent professional learning today with our literacy leaders, and they're so excited about the school year, and we're so proud of the work that they're doing. Our professional learning communities, our collaboration, our learning walks, our providing quality feedback, which was a huge part of our admin conference this year in terms of providing feedback to our teachers. And in alignment with our strategies and Compass to 2025, we will share the plans and strategies that we implemented last year and that we're planning this year by compiling a literacy and numeracy plan at a glance, almost like a one-pager, so that we are clearly communicating what our plans are and what we have in place to support student achievement. And again, we're super proud of all of our staff for the growth that we've made. And we know we have a little ways to go to make that continued progress, and we are eager to continue our work. So that being said, I'm sure Mrs. Legata and I will be happy, and I have a whole bunch of my team and staff here ready to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rogers, and we're going to start with Mrs. Melnick.
Well, if that presentation doesn't remind people what it takes to teach, I don't know what does. I'm glad you put the next steps and support up there, because we are asked. The community does say, what are you doing about learning loss? Which is our reality, right? Rebounding from learning loss is our reality. And I feel kind of sad and happy at the same time. I feel sad for our friends in other divisions who are performing so much lower than we are, but so proud of our teachers that they were able to help their kids get to this point and do pretty well on these tests given the past couple of years. So yeah, no question other than thank you especially for that, and all the other stuff in between too. And this is something I'll carry around with me.
Thank you.
Mrs. Riggs.
I don't have any questions. I just want to reiterate, thank you for this extensive report to us. I think just the way you explained it, the information, your examples really gives a view and a definitely idea of what we are doing and what we have been doing for our students. And like Ms. Melnick said, that is the question, and I've heard Ms. Felton tell me in walking around and talking to parents like she is right now during this season, these are the things, I'm not getting out as much as they are, but these are the things that we are being asked. What are you doing to make up for the loss? And you guys are working very hard. Our teachers are, our administrators are. Thank you very much for all that you're doing because you're working very hard. And I feel like every one of you, no matter how heavy some people think we have in our administrative teams, you're all needed and you're all doing your work and a good job of it. And thank you very much. I think you're all showing that you are needed and you're doing what you are hired to do. Thank you so much.
Mrs. Felton.
Thank you, Chair Rye. And I'd just like to reiterate that the presentation you gave yesterday is sort of kind of put me in a little moment of deep thinking. And I want to appreciate you and Ms. Lagata for answering and calling that same day some of the questions that I had that was on the table. I can appreciate the peer comparison that you've done. I can. I still remain concerned about our subgroups deeply, who consistently lag behind their other subgroups in Virginia Beach. Just a concern there. I hope that we will do a deeper dive, and you and I talked about it. I was on the phone. We took the time. I said I want to take a deeper dive in to see how much more we can do. Like I said, it's okay. We comparing it outside, but when you're home, you want your house. You still want your house to look good. You still want to be able to manage these things. This conversation, factors plays into the gaps in performance. How do you see the Office of Family and Engagement supporting these efforts? That's one of my department that I talk about a lot, and they gave us a good tour during our retreat. But how do you really see them playing a deeper role in this engagement?
Yeah, well, I think, Ms. Felton, all of us acknowledge in our work the importance of the partnership between our parents and our families and our teachers, our schools, and all of us acknowledge that the degree to which we are able to get parents involved with us, there was some comments about that earlier, the degree to which we're able to get parents involved with us has a meaningful impact on the success of our students, and so we know that. One of the things that has really transformed in the past couple of years in the work that happens in our Family and Community Engagement Office is our effort to not be an events-based organization, but to be a more directly impactful organization in the community. And so creating the opportunity to engage with our families, both by giving them the structures that are, we know are kind of research-driven, good best practices to support children who are in our schools at home, but also to create voice groups, because you can't assume exactly what all of our families and parents are going through, and so to create voice groups across our community where we've had the opportunity to hear from our families about the supports that they need from us, and then the opportunity for us to then think about how we provide those supports. And then, of course, we do continue to host our parent information sessions, which are really impactful in terms of being able to provide access to the resources that we offer as a school division. And the other thing that we've gotten really substantively better at is thinking about collective impact. And so the resources that are available across our community to support young people who need often more than just academic support. And so support that addresses some of the issues that are going on in their lives, either in home or in their mental health lives, and to work with our parents and to make sure that students have the supports that they need to come to school ready. One of the biggest challenges that we have with students who struggle is often that they're not ready for school, that there are other things happening in their lives. There are precursors to learning that that simply aren't there. And when we talk about that, we know, for example, I think everybody knows about, I could probably go on for a while about this, so y'all just cut me off when you're ready, but we all understand Maslow's hierarchy. right? And so, well, we say we all. So in education, we understand Maslow's hierarchy. It's something that we talk a lot about, and I know in other fields they talk about it as well, right? And so the general gist of Maslow's hierarchy are that there are needs that have to be met in order for human beings to become fully self-actualized, right? And for us, fully self-actualized mean ready to learn and motivated to learn. And those needs start with the physical needs that students have, right? So are they eating? And which is why we have such a great food services team, Vika Harrison back there and her team, and what they do to make sure that we provide meals for our students. And physical needs also mean that students need to have shelter, and they need to have clothes, and they need to feel safe. And you look at the incredible work that our school division does with our social workers to ensure that those needs are being met for our families. And that we're connecting families to the many resources that are out there in our community. What often gets overlooked, because a lot of times everybody understands that piece of it, is that Maslow's hierarchy doesn't stop there. Maslow's hierarchy then goes on to talk about the psychological needs that have to be met and the psychosocial needs that need to be met in order to be fully actualized as learners. And those are the, children need to feel, and he talks very candidly about this, children need to feel that they're loved in order to learn. We all need to feel that. We need to feel that we belong. We have to have a sense of belonging. We have to have a sense of inclusion. And so we talk a lot about, okay, how do we work with our schools, our teachers, and our community, and our families and partners so that our kids know the adults in this community are there for them and that they're supposed to be here and they're supposed to be in our classrooms and they're wanted in our classrooms. Those are the kind of precursors for learning that have to exist before any of the other stuff that we're talking about can even begin to settle in. And that's a heavy lift. And so the Family and Community Engagement Office, to kind of wrap that back around to your question, spends its days thinking about how do we leverage the partnerships in our community and how do we leverage our partnership with our parents and families to ensure that all of the best resources are available to our kids. And then ultimately, I'll just go back to this. It really isn't just on them. The biggest partnership that exists is between our teachers and our families and our kids, right? So I think if you ask any parent, 99% of our parents would tell you they love their kid's teacher. They love their kids' teachers and that their teachers are responsive to them. And, we always encourage, just pick up the phone, call your child's teacher if you have concerns about learning, and we'll continue to work with you. But, to your point, sometimes that's more challenging for some families than others, and that's where we have to step in and try to provide and make those connections.
Thank you, Dr. Spence, and I'll just wrap it up as well. I appreciate that response, and you're absolutely right. All of those things you named, they needed in the community, and I have been fortunate to have gotten out in the community the past 3 months, and the staff of Virginia Beach City School Division has been out into the community. I was very excited to introduce our principals to the community in a CTAC Community 2 events that they had, 3 events, and they were there and they were introduced. And you're right, it takes all of us. And I would like to say too about this particular board, this is one of the most engaging school board that I know of my lifetime in the city of Virginia Beach. I did not know my representative. I did not know these things. We might have them. It's okay to have all these goodies in a basket, but if you can't get to those things, if you don't know how to be directed to it, then they're just there sitting in a basket. And I just like to say that getting out in the community is very important, and I want to tell you that your principals has really been out in the community. I know with me, and I've been in several community events this year alone in the past 2 months. So thank you, Dr. Rogers and Dr. Lagoa, for what you're doing, and I do look forward to having a deeper dive with you on this and moving forward. Thank you so much.
Okay, Mrs. Anderson.
So I want to spend just a little bit more time on the 7th grade math. I don't want to gloss over this because I don't want people to have the wrong impression about the scores for 7th grade math. And I think we need to emphasize the fact that most of our academically advanced math students are encouraged to take pre-algebra. And that leaves students who are not considered academically advanced to take regular 7th grade math, which then they are tested on. Is that correct? So I do realize we need to spend some time with those students because obviously their deficit when they've left sixth grade. They enter seventh grade, they're not asked to take pre-algebra, so they're in a regular math class.
Yeah, they're on grade level, so those.
They're on grade level,
Yes.
but they're not considered advanced.
Correct.
So I think people need to realize that's why it's a smaller number of students who are taking that seventh grade test. And yes,
So
we
that's-
do
that's
need to
correct,
give them
and-
as much
and-
help as possible to get them caught up.
Right, so, and Ms. Legata can kind of jump in. So as she shared, of all of our seventh grade students, and I don't know the number, half of them are on grade level.
Right.
And then the other half are either one grade level ahead of math or two grade levels ahead of math. And either they take the eighth grade SOL as part of pre-algebra, or they take the algebra SOL, which is a high school credit course.
Right.
So do we have some work to do with our seventh grade math? Yes, we do, and we will.
And we have some work to do with our sixth grade math.
Sure.
That's feeding into that seventh grade, so that we don't have as many students who are not ready for a more academically advanced math class. So I didn't want to gloss over that. I don't want people to get the wrong impression. Oh, look at seventh grade math. That's the reason why. So just wanted to reiterate that so that people out there understand they're still on grade level. That's still seventh grade math, but I think we need to beef up sixth grade a little bit more so that we have more students who are maybe able to be considered more academically advanced in math when they get to seventh grade. So that's my take on this.
Thank you.
And for me, I guess the only thing to add to the conversation is the assessment piece of this. And it struck me the first time I looked through the slides from home, you know, how critical a component that is of this whole process. The types of assessments they're doing, how targeted they are, and the frequency of them. So, because, you know, the quality of the data is so critical to this whole piece. And I, you know, and so that resonates with me, and I just thought it was important enough to point that out. All right, it looks like we're done for now. Thank you very much. Information item C is our environmental studies program, and we're on our 2-year comprehensive evaluation. Welcome, Dr. Williams.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, school board members, and Dr. Spence. I'm Dr. Noelle Williams, a program evaluation specialist in the Office of Research and Evaluation. Today, I will provide an overview of the key findings and recommendations from the Year 2 comprehensive evaluation of the Environmental Studies program. The evaluation report you received in your agenda materials provides additional details. As you are aware, in 2018, the school board approved the proposal for the Environmental Studies program to open at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Brock Environmental Center in September 2020 to grade 11 students. During Year 2, the program reached full implementation with enrollment including students in grade 11 and grade 12. The program capacity is 100 students, 50 in each grade level. As part of the program, students take courses at their home school as well as at the Brock Center, either during the morning or the afternoon session. The program was designed to offer a comprehensive curriculum to students who are interested in environmental science and sustainability. Students have the opportunity to pursue 3 curriculum strands within the program of study: sustainable economics and business innovation, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability and natural resource stewardship. Experiential learning through hands-on scientific fieldwork is an essential component of the program. Students are fully immersed in the environment, and as part of the program in the 2021-2022 school year, students had the opportunity to travel to Bozeman, Montana and the Grand Tetons to explore sustainability on a national level. The Year 2 comprehensive evaluation focused on accomplishment of the program's goals and objectives. In addition, evaluation questions addressed the program's implementation, student characteristics, stakeholder perceptions, and costs during Year 2. Information for the evaluation came from the VBCPS data warehouse, a review of relevant documentation, and interviews with program staff, including the teaching coordinator and the teacher. Finally, data came from surveys from students and parents. The table on the slide displays the number of respondents and the survey response rates. 6 program-specific courses were offered to students in the program. 4 are offered during grade 11, and these include AP Environmental Science, Sustainability Core Concepts in Environmental Systems, Natural Resource Management, and Watershed Hydrology. In grade 12, students take 2 courses, Topical Research and Eco Summit Senior Independent Study, which includes students' senior internship. Program components also included the outdoor learning environment and use of scientific and/or technological tools during fieldwork. Students were successful in program-specific courses with at least 91% earning A's and B's in the courses. Program components such as the classes, the Brock Center, the outdoor learning environment, and the tools were all viewed positively by both students and parents, with 94 to 100% of respondents expressing satisfaction. Students and parents were also asked about the transportation as part of the program. 72% of students and 64% of parents agreed transportation allowed them or their child to fully participate in senior internships. One aspect of program implementation included the student application and selection process. Due to COVID-19 safety protocols, the majority of recruitment in the spring of 2021 for the 2021-2022 grade 11 class took place virtually via Zoom. Program staff set up meetings with schools to present to different groups of students interested in the program. The program received 62 applications and 62 students qualified for the student selection lottery with a waiting list as needed. 45 grade 11 students enrolled in September 2021. Overall, 83 grade 11 and 12 students were enrolled, which was 83% of the program's capacity. The majority were female and white. The demographic characteristics of the 2021-2022 students mirrored the characteristics of the applicants for both classes. Students enrolled in the program represented all 12 high schools across the division. The largest percentages of students attended Cox and Kellam high schools. Changes in recruitment were made in spring 2022 to diversify program applicants. For example, program staff were able to visit schools in person and focused on visiting schools with lower enrollment in the program. At these schools, program staff conducted assembly-like presentations for all grade 10 students. In 2021-2022, program staff, including the teaching coordinator and a teacher. Based on a school board approved recommendation from the year 1 evaluation report, a general assistant position was added to support the program for this school year, and the individual was hired in August 2022. The Environmental Studies program has one broad overarching goal of broadening students' understanding of sustainability. It aims to reach this goal through 5 objectives listed on the slide, including using the natural community to learn about environmental issues, service learning, integrating interdisciplinary instruction, as well as a challenge-based, collaborative, and design thinking learning, and earning the seal of excellence in science and the environment. Finally, the program aims to establish collaborative agreements with institutions of higher education. The following slides will discuss the program's accomplishment towards meeting these goals and objectives. When asked about the overall goal of the program, students and parents unanimously agreed that the program has broadened their or their child's understanding of sustainability. In an exit survey designed specifically for seniors, 85% of grade 12 students indicated that their interest in environmental science or sustainability had increased since entering the program. Students and parents agreed that the Environmental Studies program provided place-based learning opportunities with percentages ranging from 99% for students and 96% for parents. These place-based learning opportunities are provided at the Brock Learning Center, where students had the opportunity to participate in fieldwork in close proximity to the Chesapeake Bay. The program's teaching coordinator helps students make connections for their service learning projects or for their participation in community partnerships. 93% of grade 11 students and 88% of grade 12 students indicated they participated in service learning projects. Grade 11 students engaged in service learning hours embedded in their school day, and a few examples of these opportunities including partnering with the Lynn Haven River Now in stewardship projects and adopting Lock Haven Park. Example service learning partnerships for grade 12 students included the Virginia Beach Aquarium, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and the Department of Wildlife Resources. 100% of grade 11 and grade 12 students indicated the service learning project was useful. 98% of students agreed that the Environmental Studies program integrated learning across subject areas, including policy, science, contemporary social issues, environmental issues, and economic issues. To gauge whether the program incorporated challenge-based collaborative and design thinking learning, students were asked 3 questions on the survey and parents were asked 1. In the first graph, 92% of students and 91% of parents agreed that the program provided them or their child with rigorous and challenging learning experiences. As shown in the second slide, 100% of students agreed that the program provided them with opportunities to be collaborative, and 98% of the students agreed the program provided opportunities for them to participate in design thinking. The Seal of Excellence in Science and the Environment is awarded to students who met the criteria set by the VDOE. Of the 38 students in grade 12, 97% earned the Seal of Excellence. In addition, 95% earned the Advanced Diploma, and 5% earned a Standard Diploma. The program has continued its goal of establishing collaborative agreements with several universities, including Old Dominion, Virginia Wesleyan, and Virginia Tech Agricultural Extension. Other partnerships were established with numerous organizations, including nonprofits that are listed on the slide. The partnerships with a star next to them indicate a partnership that was new in the 2021-2022 school year. Stakeholders' overall perception of the program were also assessed, including asking students and parents to indicate their overall satisfaction with the program. Strong positive results were found for both students and parents, with satisfaction levels ranging from 92 to 96%. 96% of students and 98% of parents agreed that they would recommend the program to others. 95% of students and 90% of parents agreed that the program met the students' learning needs. To assess the program's impact on students, a portion of the survey for seniors included future-oriented questions about their post-graduation plans and preparation. 94% of seniors agreed or strongly agreed that the program helped them make decisions about their future education or employment. 88% of seniors indicated that the program prepared them to continue their education in environmental science, sustainability, or related fields. 93% of students furthering their education after high school graduation indicated that their intended major was related to environmental science or sustainability, and 75% of those seeking employment after graduation indicated that their future planned job is related to environmental science or sustainability. The Environmental Studies Program Year 2 annual operating costs totaled $329,091. This was $50,891 more than the total projected annual operating cost of $278,200 for Year 2 of the program. The largest operating costs included program-specific staff, which included the salary and benefits for the teaching coordinator and 1 full-time teacher, as well as transportation. As a result of the Year 2 comprehensive evaluation, we have 3 recommendations. Recommendation number 1 is to continue the Environmental Studies program with modifications noted in recommendations 2 and 3. Recommendation number 2, continue to monitor the recruitment and admissions process to ensure the program is operating at capacity as well as serving a diverse population. Recommendation number 3 is to investigate potential transportation solutions for seniors to participate in internships. At this time, the teaching coordinator, Mr. Chris Freeman, will provide the administration's response.
Welcome.
We concur with the recommendation provided in the report. Related to the recommendation, about the recruitment and administration process, it is important to recognize that COVID impacted our first 2 years of recruitment. We had 99 applications completed by students this year, which may be more reflective of what we can expect to see in upcoming years. We have been monitoring our enrollment and adjusting our recruitment strategies. Our incoming junior class is now the largest yet, putting us at capacity for juniors, and we have a waiting list. We are committed to have a student body that is representative and reflective of the diverse, dynamic range of faces across our school system. And with this incoming class, we have our most diverse group of students to date. Our changes in recruitment reflect our mission of inclusivity. We focused on application numbers by school, held more in-person outreach sessions in schools where we were seeing lower numbers in applications that were coming in. We also held more in-person outreach sessions in schools that have greater diversity. We also have implemented an outreach program in Title I elementary schools, where last year our students, in a form of vertical integration, went out and taught outdoor lessons to over 450 fifth grade students, creating hands-on learning opportunities that helped connect students to our program at a very young age. Related to the recommendation about transportation and senior internships. Our seniors did not just come to the Brock Center to learn, although they learn a lot there as well. They're also spending part of their day out in the community, working with community partners in a career path that relates to their future hopes and dreams. This helps students gain valuable workplace connections, resume building experiences, and helps students see firsthand the great work taking place in Virginia Beach related to science and sustainability. We want to ensure that all of our students in the environmental studies program are not limited by their transportation needs to meaningful internships throughout Virginia Beach. We have worked with transportation to assist in transporting some of our students to their internships. Transportation has also provided us with a white bus, of which I drive, for our students to be picked up from their internships and brought back to the Brock Center in time to catch their buses home. We are currently working with a VBCPS team to expand on options that we currently have in place. We're looking into using a school-vetted taxi service, and we are also exploring the cost and school safety components of using other transportation services for our students. We would also like to take the time to thank the school board for the continued support of the Environmental Studies program at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation's Brock Environmental Center. This public-private partnership is the result of your dynamic commitment to education, the support and collaboration of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, individuals within the school division, and the continued growth and personal engagement with our community partners. We are ever grateful for the support of Macon and Joan Brock, whose generosity created the trailblazing architecture of our facilities. Our success is through student empowerment and giving students a voice in the community through fostering individual passions. And as an example, last year we had 3 students write a bill addressing food insecurities, negotiating bipartisan patronage, testifying in the General Assembly, and these students had their bill unanimously passed in the House and the Senate, and it was signed into law by our governor. That is definitely something to be proud of, and it is reflective of how we use student voice to engage in community work now so that they're ready to make the right decisions and make a brighter future for tomorrow. We are now ready to take any questions that you have at this time.
Okay, we'll start with Mrs. Franklin. Well, congratulations. That's amazing that you got bipartisan support on that. And one thing that I want to ask you is, are we thinking a little bit outside of the box in terms of, for example, could we provide some kind of tours to the public to raise money to help with transportation costs and different things like that? In order to, just thinking like, the GRC has the foundation ball, I would just love to see if we could, because we already have community support, let's maybe build on that and see if we could perhaps give tours of the center, at a small, at a contribution or donation or something like that. I'm just curious if that's even an option to try and raise some funds.
I think there are a lot of options that we're exploring right now as a team, and I really appreciate that advice, that comment. We're certainly keeping everything on the table to work to provide and make sure that it's not just students that have a car, they can get to a meaningful
Right.
partnership. And that's critical for
Yeah.
the growth of looking at the community as a classroom and redefining what that classroom looks like
Well,
by
I think-
having students
yeah.
directly out in that community.
I think getting the community excited. I mean, when I went to the Brock Center, I was astounded at how very cool that was. And so I didn't even realize it was there off of Shore Drive. So yeah, I think that maybe we make it more known, get more recognition, and get the community more engaged and involved and excited. So just my thought.
Thank you for that input.
Okay, we have Ms. Owens, then Mrs. Weems, getting you to the list.
Thank you. Thank you. Share my excitement about all of the wonderful things going on at the Brock Center. I'm very excited to hear that we're open to exploring other transportation options, including possible taxi services. I know that we already transport some of our students who are in the homeless program using approved taxi services, and so that may be something that we can expand upon. My question is in regards to the demographics and expanding the diversity in the program. I know that the statistic that we have is for the majority of the students being white females. Do we have demographic numbers on kind of as a whole what we're looking at, like how many black males are participating in the program and those other demographic categories so that we can have an understanding of the full picture?
So as for combining the idea of like a black males, I don't have that right offhand, but I can get it for you. But
It's in the evaluation report on page 12.
yeah, on page 12, I have breakdown of by gender, ethnicity.
I'm sorry, Ms. Owens, it's in the report itself, not the
yes.
presentation.
I'm happy to tell it to you. if
Okay,
that's what you'd
perfect,
like.
thank
Sure.
you.
So in the entire program, the females 61%, male is 39%. If we move to ethnicity, American Indian, the number is less than 5 students, so we don't publish that because for privacy purposes. The Asian, Native, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander is 4%. Black African American is 6%. Hispanic is 5%. Multiracial is 6%. And white is 78%.
Okay. Thank you. And so we don't have necessarily
Yes.
by
So if you're
race and
yeah, if you're
gender.
combining, putting together, like if you're asking specifically about Black African American males, I do
Mm-hmm.
not have that on hand, but I can absolutely get it for you.
Great.
Sure.
Yep, thank you, and I'm glad to see that we're recognizing that we want it to be more inclusive, and obviously pandemic did impact the way we were able to get into the schools, and so I'm excited to hear we're going to be in Title I schools and that we're using students to go back and talk about their experiences. I think that it hits differently when it's coming from a student who's enjoying it.
Exactly, and I do want to point out, I believe I'm correct in saying this, that that does not include our current junior makeup, and it is our most diverse, and that is a part of what we were working very hard with getting into specific schools, and also really giving students the opportunity to work with students to help make sure that they see a student that maybe came from their feeder school that's going to their high school, and they understand that that's a person who is inspiring them to move forward, and they understand what our program can do for them moving forward.
Excellent. I look forward to watching the progress that we continue to make on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mrs. Weems, you're on.
Yeah, kind of to echo what my colleagues have said, great job. I think it's fantastic that you're going in the schools with the students. We've done that with academies for Academy Night. We've done it with career and technology, VOTEC programs to say, you know, here I am doing this, I love it, and you can be where I am in a few years. And the fact that you're starting at the elementary level is awesome, to just to spark their interest and give them a role model and something to shoot for. I think that's a great job. So, and again, the transportation is key. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Good job.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mrs. Anderson.
Oops, sorry. Hats off to you. I'm thrilled with this program. From the time of its inception, we heard about it, I think it was in 2014, 13, 15, 14, 14.
I think 15
I
was
knew
the
it was
first year
way
we-
back.
we brought it up.
But so from the time I heard about it, I was excited about it. And now to see it grow and expand, I'm thrilled about it. I hope we can expand it even more. I would love to hear about that in the future. I know that we only have so much room in the classroom out there, but, you know, we have 50 students in our junior class this year, and so that's at capacity. And so I did hear you say that we had quite a large waiting list. So I would love to be able to bring those students in somehow, you know, in the future, so that our waiting list is not so big. It'd be nice to be able to expand it to the point that we could somehow bring those students who are on the waiting list in. I don't know how we'll do it, but, you know, if we think outside the box, we can come up with a solution. Because I mean, I'm thrilled that we have a waiting list, but I'm not. At the same time, I'm like, oh, that's too bad. Those students who wanted to do this and didn't have an opportunity because they're on the waiting list, too bad for them. I'm really sorry that they didn't get in this year. But, you know, maybe in the future we can think about something and how to include those students somehow. But I'm just thrilled with this, and you have done so much.
Are you suggesting the board would like to build us another classroom out there?
No, I'm not suggesting
Okay.
that.
I just thought I'd ask.
No, but it sure would be nice. We'll have to talk with maybe some other private investors who may be interested in doing that for us. Thank you.
Thank you, and I look forward to further discussions about growth.
Well, I never miss an opportunity to say I think you're amazing. I say it every time you're before us. You taught my daughter environmental science at Kellam High School. You had a hand in raising that kid, and she is, you know, who she is partly because of you. So I thank you, and it looks like you're doing the same for so many more kids, and our kids sure are lucky. Thank you.
And I have to add that I think I speak on behalf of everybody when I say yours is the program our most favorite program to visit because of the location.
Well, you are always welcome.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to be quiet and not say anything, but I'd just like to say that thank you for inviting me to the students, inviting me to the first graduation class. Very exciting things went on, and all that you listed here concerning how the students and the parents felt. I took the opportunity to walk around the room and to have a conversation, and you're absolutely right. And I had one parent to tell me, give me her personal testimony about her daughter who came, who was so sheltered, but in your class, you opened her up and met her social and emotional needs, and it moved her through the program, and she just brightened up as a student and as a person, as an individual. Greta Thunberg, Greta would love this group. She would really be proud of this group. She would give you kudos. I might write her a letter and send her some of the pictures as well. I know some of us sort of flinch about the waiting list. I like waiting lists. Let me know they're interested and they want to be involved with it as well. And you are getting our division out there. Mostly every board that I sit on, Park and Recs, Virginia Beach Historic Preservation, and the legislator, your name is out there. You're called Miss Environmentalist. And they are glad about the work you're doing here for Virginia Beach because our students can give back. And you didn't talk about the entrepreneurships that came out of your program. The students that created their own businesses within your program and did well with it as well. So I'm just excited about it. You might want to mention it now, but I'm excited about this program. Always have been. I just look to see more progress with it as well. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I truly it was a great honor to have you be a part of the first graduating class. And in terms of those exciting entrepreneurship opportunities, and also students really empowering work that they're being able to do at the college level, there's some tremendous opportunities. We have developed a program through ODU where students are not just learning about oceanography field-based practices, but they're actually learning coding, understanding Python, and doing 3D computer modeling to support the field-based oceanographic work that's taking place and understanding what options are available to them at amazing universities in our area. We also had students at Virginia Wesleyan that were taking place and doing some pretty outstanding work related to a study on the heat island effect and diversity, looking at science connected to equity and housing and greenery and heat capacity in our city. Really fascinating work that people are engaged in, using science and sustainability to solve real-world problems today to make a better tomorrow.
And you speak to that very high percentage of students. I mean, it's a small sampling at this point, but who've retained that interest to go as they go on to higher ed. I mean, it was over 70%. That's phenomenal. So, okay.
We want to make sure that those students are able to go into those younger grades and make sure that they're having an impact on 65,000 students that are part of Virginia Beach Public Schools.
All right, we thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Our final information item of the evening is the school board compensation philosophy, which was a topic of discussion at the summer retreat. So welcome again, Dr. Woodhouse. Ms. Woodhouse.
Welcome. Good evening, Chairwoman Rye, Vice Chair Melnick, members of the school board, and Dr. Spence. I am Cheryl Woodhouse, Chief Human Resources Officer with the Department of Human Resources. This evening, I will present a copy of the school board compensation philosophy. During the school board's retreat on July 19th, members of the board met with the division's consultant from Siegel, Dr. Paula Singer, to finalize the review and updating of the board's compensation philosophy. While we have provided a marked up copy of the changes to you, the following slides represent those changes agreed to by the board during that meeting. The opening vision statement of the compensation philosophy remains unchanged. It continues to be tied to Goal 4 of the division's strategic plan of providing an exemplary and diversified workforce. Specifically, it states the school board will strive to attract and retain a highly qualified and diverse workforce, ensure fair and consistent pay practices, comply with applicable laws and regulations, and operate within the constraints of the fiscal resources while balancing and achieving educational goals. The next slide will begin to go into detail around what was changed from the previous compensation philosophy. So item 1 clarifies the geographical area in which the board identified and would like to have Virginia Beach be more competitive with and remain competitive. And that area was identified as southeastern Virginia. and for some positions outside of our local labor market. In reviewing item 2, there were no changes around benchmarking and broad banding in terms of similar positions and how we determine salaries. Item 3 recognized that flexibility is needed at times when we need to maintain, but we still need to maintain the internal equity of our pay scales. Sometimes pay adjustments may be needed to fill hard-to-staff positions, especially those singular in nature or unique positions. Item 4, remove the language, absent starting pay being adjusted by market conditions, recognizing that further along you'll see that the board is requesting that we review salaries more often and more frequently for many of our positions. And item 5, remain as is and addresses allowances. On the next slide, we continue with items 6 through 10. Item 6 remains as is and was just renumbered, and again, it addresses supplements and how we issue supplements. Items 7 and 8 also remain as written and were just renumbered as we adjusted items. And you'll see the original item number 7 was crossed off and renumbered number 6 as we made adjustments to the first 5. Item 9 recommends that we continue to evaluate all instructional pay scales annually, and all other groups are reviewed between 3 and 5 years and/or as determined by the board.
Ms. Woodhouse?
Yes,
ma'am. Since we did get an email inquiry on that today, can you just elaborate a little further on the rationale behind the distinction between annual evaluation and a longer period for other positions?
Okay, so as a division, it's always been customary for HR to present annually an update, and the competitiveness did focus mainly around our instructional positions so that we can ensure that we have highly qualified teachers in the classroom. It did not mean we didn't look at other groups, but in honesty, we have so many different employee groups. The focus was teachers annually. Other groups that we as a department or was brought out in the market study that may need to be looked at, as well as where our challenges may lie. So earlier, when you think about the workshop presentation, when we look not just at our teachers, we look at what positions we're having difficulty filling, those hard to fill positions. And as I brought to the attention of the board, for us this year has been custodial positions and food service business positions. So naturally, we will include those 2 positions in the presentation that we will bring forth during the budget time frame. That is customary how we've always done it, and will continue to do so unless, the board guides us in another direction.
Also, fair to say, right, Ms. Woodhouse, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that there's a different market outside of the instructional positions that we would need to look at, and it's a much broader market. And so to do an annual review of each of the positions outside of the instructional range would create a workload that would not be sustainable for her team. We would have to contract that out.
Correct. And we find
Thank
with
you.
the competitiveness too, as Dr. Spence indicated, many pretty much stay in sync with one another, but teachers knowing that that is very highly competitive, we try to look at those definitely annually. And then number 10, this information is actually a new statement that was recommended by the consultant, Paula Singer. During the workshop, there was a discussion surrounding the areas of responsibility. The statement identifies the areas of responsibility for reviewing, evaluating the division's pay plans. Therefore, number 10 is a new statement where the Department of Human Resources would be responsible for evaluating the pay programs for alignment with the compensation philosophy, Senior leadership would be responsible for proposing any changes to the program, and as always, the school board is responsible for approving any of those proposed changes. So again, a markup of the entire document was provided, and that pretty much concludes the presentation on the school board's compensation philosophy. And if there are any other questions that I may address, I'm happy to do so.
We'll start with Mrs. Franklin.
Ms. Woodhouse, hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I do want to ask you what your opinion is of the concern that we had from the teacher that came and spoke tonight on the step, for past 30 years. I'm sorry.
So I do want to clarify, I think there may be some misunderstandings in terms of our pay scales, and we have had this conversation, and we have also shared it with Single, who's doing our compensation study. We don't stop acknowledging years of service at year 30. Teachers continue to progress on the pay scale. It's not published, which we definitely need to correct. And so honestly, I probably would need a little bit more information, because many times, if you notice, when we do our raises as a division, we sometimes indicate a certain percentage for step and then a certain percentage for cost of living. This year, thanks to the board, you voted to give all of our employees the full 6%. So that's part of that conversation that, one, I need to get a little bit more information from Ms. Comer, who I know well from my days at Tallwood High School, and just to make sure that we're clarifying that language. You do not get to 30 years and just stop. If that was the case, we would never have employees working 40 plus years within our division. So that means our department needs to do a better job ensuring that the pay scale goes beyond 30 years and that it's clearly communicated that everyone is involved in any compensation increases that the board votes on annually as you do so.
Okay, well, it's just because this, again, we have seen her several times now.
We have, yes.
So this obviously is something that she feels very strongly about, and I have to think that it's not just her that might have this misinformation.
Correct.
And so, if we could do something to make sure that that gets out there and just gets acknowledged, corrected, whatever.
Correctly.
Can I just clarify that? I know I'm out of turn. Oh, okay, thank you.
Well, so, right, just to the additional layer of clarity,
Right.
typically, we do not provide a step increase after 30. So once you've hit 30, there's not a step increase, but the cost of living adjustment is what's provided to all employees. And so they continue to receive a raise. So if, for example, typically we would have, for last year, let's use last year's example quickly, we would have said 5.5% cost of living adjustment, 0.5% step increase, and that anybody above 30 would have gotten the 5.5% cost of living adjustment. They wouldn't have gotten the 0.5%. Last year, given the circumstances we were facing, we suggested that we give everybody the full 6%, as Ms. Woodhouse noted. But typically, the way our scale works, there isn't a step increase after 30. Now, that isn't to say that as we come back with the market compensation study, that one of the things we'll likely review with you is the scales and how the scales work, and then that'll be an opportunity to have further discussion at that time about what the scales look like.
Well, just to address that, I mean, I thought that she did bring a good point in the sense that we don't want to be losing these valuable employees. So anyway.
Correct. Exactly.
So we have Ms. Owens and then Mrs. Anderson.
Yeah, I won't belabor the point. That was kind of where I was going as well. With our new or updated number one about being competitive, hopefully we'll be able to look, and if we have districts like Chesapeake that are doing their steps past 30, that we will be competitive and look at doing it as well. So I'm sure we will get more information as that comes out.
Yes, ma'am. You will.
So I just wanted to say, thank you for clarifying that, because that's what was confusing for me too. She was saying one thing and then you clarified that. So thank you very much. I just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
And again, and to provide context again for this was tutored by our consultant as well as a critical first step in the ongoing process of this compensation study.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. They have full board direction as well as some senior leadership direction as well.
All right, we thank you.
Thank you.
Here's my- All right, the consent agenda portion of the agenda, item 14. I'll go ahead and read these are a good many policy items, but a few others as well. Beginning with A, program evaluation schedule for 22-23. B, the Renaissance Academy Alternative Education Program, the Evaluation Readiness Report, previously shared. C, policy review recommendations as follows. 1, policy 215, communications with staff. 2, policy 4-8, employee input process. 3, policy 6-29, drug and drug abuse education. 4, policy 6-40/science. 5, policy 6-54, homework. 6, policy 6-73, testing and assessment. 7 is policy 6-81, adult education. 8 is policy 6-82, adult high school diploma program. And the final item up for consent is D, religious exemptions. Motion to approve. Mrs. Riggs, and a second, Mrs. Franklin. All in favor, show a raised hand, please.
Madam Chair, we have 10 ayes, so the motion did pass.
Thank you. So now on to the action part of the agenda. Personnel report, administrative appointments. Motion to approve. Mrs. Melnick, a second, Mrs. Anderson. Any discussion? All right then, all in favor, kindly show a raised hand.
Madam Chair, we have 10 ayes, the motion did pass.
All right, we'll turn it over to Dr. Spence to announce our administrative appointments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that very much. If I could start by asking Shaheen Sarani to please stand up. Mr. Sarani has worked as a teacher in Norfolk and instructional coach in Washington, D.C. He's been a teacher here in Tallwood High School. Most recently has served as school improvement specialist at Tallwood High School. And this evening, we are pleased you've accepted our recommendation for him to serve as the next assistant principal at Tallwood High School. Congratulations. I understand you may have guests with you? Yes. My wife Serena and Thank you for being here. If I could ask Rachel Amato to please stand up. Chef Amato has been a teaching assistant, a visiting professor, and a program lead in higher education. She has served in Virginia Beach as a culinary development chef assistant in the Office of Food Services. Most recently, she's been serving as the district chef for the Office of Food Services. We're pleased this evening you've accepted our recommendation for her to serve as the next assistant director in the Office of Food Services in the Department of School Division Services. Congratulations. I understand you also have a guest with you. Thank you all very much for being here. Madam Chair, that's it. Believe it or not, that's it for tonight.
Thank you. All right, we have one policy review action item, which is a bylaw. 19 qualifications. Motion to approve. Mrs. Holtz, a second. Mrs. Holtz. All right, Mrs. Anderson. So Mrs. Linetti, would you care to briefly share what this is?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, Vice Chair, School Board members, and Dr. Spence, I'm Cammie Linetti, School Board Attorney, and on behalf of the PRC, we are presenting policy, bylaw 19. The reason the bylaw comes on action is because bylaw cannot go on consent. It does require a higher level of votes. This evening, because you have less than all 11 members here present voting tonight, the vote count has to be half plus one. So that's five plus one. So you will need 6. Again, that's why we don't have it on consent, because it's the bylaw and we wouldn't be able to do a simple majority for it. So the only reason, again, it's on action is because the bylaw requirements under bylaw 130 require higher level votes. Bylaw 19 was the qualifications. There were qualifications for school board members. This was a much shorter policy. There were significant changes in the General Assembly about 2 years ago that changed some of the requirements for local office holders. This led to some of the election issues. We held off changing this bylaw. We were waiting to see what the outcome of the court case was involving the election system. And after where we are with the court case, we decided it was time to go ahead and at least get the bylaw up to date, particularly since we have a new election coming in. So what we did with this bylaw is we broke it into sections. So you have section A, qualified voters and a bona fide resident. You remember this was an issue for us a number of years ago. It was clarified in the General Assembly what it takes to be a qualified voter. We had to recognize the new requirements, whether it's district or at-large or appointed. So that is that's reflected in section A. Section B also talks about resident of a district or ward, or if at large of the city. Again, the new requirement was specified that in the General Assembly, so that's spelled out a little bit more. One of the things you will notice that we put in the opening paragraph reads qualifications for election or appointment to and continuing service on the school board of the city of Virginia Beach are established in legal reference to this bylaw. And then we added the phrase, or as required by a court of competent jurisdiction, because we recognize with the status of the appeal on the city's election system and possible changes coming up, we will not know what the eventual election system will be. So we put that in there so we'd have that, the bylaw would be at least in accordance with whichever system comes out first. Again, the oath of office, which is section C, is not a new requirement, and section D, compliance with Conflict of Interest Act filings, also not a new requirement. We just simply put them out as sections. So the only purpose of this bylaw is to make it compliant with the current law and reflect where the city is right now with the election system. Nothing really significant, but certainly we needed to bring this bylaw up into compliance with the current law.
So are there any questions or comments? Well, again, I thank you again for that recap. So then we'll bring this to a vote now. So all in favor, show a raised hand, please.
Madam Chair, we have 10 ayes. The motion did pass.
Thank you. All right, action item C, resolution, parental rights recognized in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. I'll first call for a motion on this to allow for discussion. Mrs. Hughes, in a second. Mrs. Weems. All right, Mrs. Hughes, would you kindly read the resolution?
Whereas the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach, Virginia, recognizes parents are the first and most important teachers in their children's lives, and whereas the School Board of the City of Virginia Beach, Virginia, recognizes that parents are in the best position to know their children's needs and circumstances, and whereas Section 1-240.1 of the Code of Virginia states that a parent has a fundamental right to make decisions concerning the upbringing, education, and care of the parent's child, and whereas the single most important indicator of student success is parental involvement, now therefore be it resolved that 1, neither the board nor the administration of Virginia Beach City Public Schools will create or enforce policies, regulations, or practices which make health care decisions for students contrary to the will of their parents. 2, Virginia Beach City Public Schools shall develop an opt-in policy requiring parental notification of required classroom reading and a parent's signature before books are given to students. 3, Virginia Beach City Public Schools shall develop a system where parents receive an email when their students check out a book from the library. The email will contain a link to websites where parents can vet the books checked out. 4, this policy shall be in effect beginning immediately. Be it further resolved that it will not be the policy of Virginia Beach City Public Schools to override the wishes of parents and or guardians with respect to health care decisions, to include physical and emotional health or educational decisions. Also, be it further resolved that under no circumstances will students be encouraged by any board member or employee, including the superintendent and his or her staff, to discourage students from discussing all personal decisions, physical and emotional health questions and decisions, academic materials, and information gained in our schools with their parents and/or guardians.
Thank you.
Did you want me to go on to say what? Okay. So, point number one here with the healthcare practices, someone did point out that this could possibly interfere with sending home a child with a fever. It actually would not. That's a general policy that's longstanding, and nurses, of course, are going to call parents when children are sick. However, I have a substantial problem, and many parents do, with the fact that this division created a policy where students were required to either get an unapproved vaccine or have a cotton swab shoved up their nose weekly in order to participate in sports, whether or not parents wanted them vaccinated. This was a vaccine that was not mandated by the state, as other vaccines are, and there really weren't opt-outs for this, as there are for other vaccinations, and that just shouldn't happen again. Number two, the opt-in policy requiring parental notification of required classroom reading. I believe we discussed at our last meeting that based on a new state law, that's going to happen whether this is passed or not. Number three, the notification for books checked out of the library. I'd like to point out this has been incorrectly characterized as book banning. Frankly, I think the highly sexualized material should be removed from school libraries. That in and of itself is not a ban. Nobody's asking for things to be removed from public libraries or bookstores. However, this resolution does not call for any of them to be removed. It just says that parents should be notified when their children check books out. If you have a problem with the book, you are going to need to speak to your child and have them take that book back. If you do not have a problem with that book, no action is needed. There are parents who may not have a problem with the book being checked out, but they would like to know their child has it to have a discussion with them, and that's fine too. So if I don't want my child to have something, it has zero impact on whether or not she wants her child to have something. And we had many, many people stand up here and say you should make decisions only for your own child. This does that. And the last point is, we are hearing from parents that students are having, getting pronoun surveys and asking whether or not you want to discuss that with your parents. That is something that students should be speaking to their parents about. Regardless of where you land on an issue, we should be encouraging children to talk to their parents. And so I think that we do need to acknowledge that parents are the most important people in their children's lives. We need to be encouraging that bond and partnering instead of stepping in as an entity and trying to take precedence over parental decisions.
Mrs. Melnick?
As I stated in my email, I have a substitute resolution that I would like to submit. Would you like me to read it?
Go ahead.
Whereas the school board of the city of Virginia Beach, Virginia recognizes parents and family members are the first and most important teachers in their children's lives. And whereas the school board of the city of Virginia Beach, Virginia recognizes that parents and families are in the best position to know their children's needs and circumstances. And whereas Section 22.1-279.3 of the Code of Virginia states that a school board shall provide opportunities for parental and community involvement in every school in the school division. And whereas impactful family engagement empowers families to support their child's success. And whereas the school board of the city of Virginia Beach is committed to the involvement and engagement of all families regardless of circumstance. And whereas Virginia Beach City Public Schools and the school board of the city of Virginia Beach, Virginia have continually shown their commitment to parents and families by embedding mutually supportive partnerships in the school division's strategic plan. Now, therefore, be it resolved that 1, Virginia Beach City Public Schools will continue to expand access to parents and families to give input and feedback by developing multiple channels of communication, including but not limited to community conversations, family focus groups, family connections, and town hall meetings. 2, Virginia Beach City Public Schools will continue to strengthen connections and communication with families and students in most need of additional supports. 3, Virginia Beach City Public Schools will create practices to improve parent and family access to division information by ensuring interpretation and translation of documents into the school division's critical language areas. 4, Virginia Beach City Public Schools will continue to allocate resources to the Office of Family and Community Engagement to expand the family outreach program in order to engage families in all schools with the intent to create awareness of resources and access to opportunities. 5, Virginia Beach City Public Schools will continue to operate and expand the Family and Community Engagement Center, as it is an essential resource that aids and supports family well-being. 6, the Virginia Beach School Board will continue to ensure compliance with all laws of the federal government and the Commonwealth regarding the partnership between parents, families, and the school division. 7, the Virginia Beach School Board will continue to ensure compliance with and communication about its policies concerning parent engagement with the division, including but not limited to parent rights to review and challenge instructional materials outlined in Regulation 6.61-2, relations with the public as described in Policy 7-1, and community engagement as described in Policy 7-18. 8, the Virginia Beach School Board will continue to encourage a robust relationship with the Virginia Beach Council of PTAs and school units as described by Policy 7-31. 9, Virginia Beach City Public Schools should continue to collaborate with community-based health providers to respond to students' immediate physical and mental health needs and ensure continuity of care. 10, given the strong research-based connection between social-emotional development and academic success, Virginia Beach City Public Schools will continue to uplift and support social-emotional learning. Be it further resolved that families will continue to be recognized as equal partners in decisions that impact their children and will be empowered to advocate for and influence policies, programs, and learning opportunities to support future-ready learners and student success. And Madam Chair,
Is there a second for this substitute motion to open it up? Mrs. Anderson, okay.
Madam Chair, I submitted this resolution because, and I thought long and hard about this because, I mean, I've been on the board for 8 years. I've never engaged in writing a resolution, but I really believe that resolutions are uplifting and they present what we do and what we do well and what we will continue to do. And I honestly felt that the initial resolution was myopic in thought and that it did not meet the needs of all of our families. And we heard that tonight. We heard that from people who disagreed with the first. So I offer a solution, one that I think is palatable and recognizes what we do. I do have a concern about a potential to compromise our partnerships. Most importantly, as you remember from our retreat, Mr. Jameson talked about a unique partnership that we have with CHKD, and I worry about the dissolution of those partnerships. The CHKD, Kempsville Center for Behavioral Health, Barry Robinson Center, Family Insight Services, National Counseling Group, and including the Recovery School, which is currently being investigated. And I felt that first resolution could compromise all of that. Of course, opt-out policies are far easier for a school division of this size to manage. Honestly, I'll probably be sorry for saying this, but the truth is I also did not want my colleagues to have to vote no against that original policy because I was afraid that they would be vilified on social media. And so I made a leadership decision and presented this for the benefit of the division and my colleagues. And with that.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Anderson and Mrs. Hughes?
I think that the substitute resolution is broad, and all-encompassing, and, shows that we respect parent rights. But along with the parent rights, it also, brings to light all the things that we're already doing to help our parents, to help our students. And I think this is the best solution for showing that we want our parents to have a say. We encourage our parents to have a say in their with their students. So I'm in favor of this, and I feel like this really answers the question of, yes, we support parent rights, and we support parents to be able to utilize these services that are encompassed in this. And I think it's a good solution for what we want parents to be able to do.
Mrs. Hughes?
So I think probably most of the public realizes why this was put forward, because you were concerned in an election year that people may vote no to it and be vilified. I think we have enough people showing up at meetings on a regular basis that we know that a great deal of the public does feel that parental rights are not respected. I will say number 3 on here about translation and interpretation, I think that's great. I really do like that part of it. But really all of the rest of it says we're going to continue to do what we've been doing. And I don't think that's good enough, because we have people showing up here every single week saying that they're not happy about some of the things that are being done. Saving yourself on election day is not a good reason to not discuss or vote on a resolution. That's just not acceptable. And when parents show up, the higher their numbers are, the more policies we make limiting access. So I don't think that does show respect for the public, and that was one of the reasons that brought me to wanting to put together a parental rights resolution. I know of at least one other division that has passed one, much for the same reason. And I would also say that when you're concerned with any entity, whether it's a school division, a business, whatever it is, any entity, when you want to improve, you do highlight what you're doing well, but you need to also highlight what you're not doing well. You can pat yourself on the back for good things, but you should also be troubleshooting the things where you fall short. And frankly, we do a lot of things well, but we also have things we fall short on. And one of the things we fall short on is making parents feel like they have a seat at the table. Because if we did, we wouldn't have the numbers that we have every single meeting.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Franklin. I just wanted to make a comment here, and I just want to say thank you for the time that you took to put the substitute resolution together. I do actually like a few of the statements as well, but I just feel like it's a little, I'm just afraid it's unnecessary, and it's also just going to create fodder that will, again, take the focus away from the things that we need to stay focused on. And so, I just wanted to explain, but I feel like it's just not a necessary way to utilize a resolution, so thank you.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I was surprised when I read this resolution. I didn't get it till last night because I was at work all day, so I didn't have a chance to call the author about it. But because just about a year ago, the author of this resolution stated she couldn't support a resolution that was brought forth because, quote unquote, that's not how we do business. We don't do business through resolutions. We don't just say things that we're doing. That's not what resolutions are for. And in fact, that's what this resolution is doing. It's doing business and it's saying things that we're already doing. So to me, when I read it, it kind of smelled of politics. And now we hear tonight it was, in fact, a political move to avoid a vote. So I don't think it's necessary. Like Ms. Franklin said, I appreciate the first one. And so I will not support this.
So when I read it, I did see a resolve here. I mean, just like we've committed to more employee engagement. For me, you know, personally, the commitment to seek even more ways for parent and family engagement and input, which number one recognizes one right off the bat. So always efforts to continue there. I think for me, this whole concept of family-school partnership seems to have gotten lost in the shuffle. And so yes, it's about parents, but it's also about and parents and families. It's also about the other part of the equation, the school and the staff and the teacher. And even more granular than that, it's about the parent-teacher relationship. And so for me, it's something I take very personally because it's been part of my DNA. And I think it's been very hurtful to a lot of folks, a lot of staff, when we try to focus so much on one side of the equation and not the other. That partnership doesn't work. And I think it's about time that we did recognize the reality and the importance of the partnership. At the new teacher session that we were invited to, and some of us, me and my colleagues, were present, I read a poem that spoke to that partnership, and specifically the parent-teacher partnership. And I just would like to read it now because, again, I just feel when I see a resolution that just seems to talk about one piece and not the other side, and I look through all of, well, let me go ahead and read this. It's a unity poem, author's unknown, but I've shared it for decades with both teacher groups and PTAs. I dreamed I stood in a studio and watched two sculptors there. The clay they used was a young child's mind, and they fashioned it with care. One was a teacher. The tools he used were books, music, and art. One was a parent with a guiding hand and a gentle, loving heart. Day after day, the teacher toiled with touch that was deft and sure, while the parent labored by his side and polished and smoothed it o'er. And when at last their task was done, they were proud of what they had wrought, for the things they had molded into the child could neither be sold nor bought. And each agreed that he would have failed if he had worked alone, for behind the teacher stood the school, and behind the parent the home. So again, I just want to reiterate that we need to continue to reinforce that a partnership is a two-way street, and I feel this substitute resolution speaks to that. Now, if it reinforces a lot of what we're doing, but I think it goes on a limb to say to reinforce our commitment to many of these areas, and again, a resolve to do even better in other areas. So, but it is a partnership. I don't know how much more I can convey that. And Ms. Owens.
Thank you. I have to say, I don't love the idea of a resolution for this situation. I think one of the things we heard, and I don't remember one of the speakers say, is that the board doesn't give parental rights, that people have their rights, and obviously that is true. We are not here to give people rights. There's a couple of different things that I would find concerning with the resolution presented by Ms. Hughes, particularly some of the openness of the number one with health. The opt-in policy just seems really concerning to me in terms of practicality, when we just sat in a presentation and heard how many parents hadn't turned in their opt-in for transportation that they know is needed every day, and that we've been hammering home the need for that, and still we are a week and a half in trying to track this down, trying to get parents, and that's just one thing that needed to be signed, not every book, every assignment type deal. So I don't think that this is practical. I don't love the wording of the new resolution though either. I think some of the statements aren't helpful for all families. When we make the statement that the schools have continually shown their commitment to parents and families by embedding mutually supportive partnerships, I do think lots of people have experienced that and feel that way. And we have other families who have not felt that commitment, and we hear from those families. And so I don't know that that does the best job acknowledging them. I do appreciate very much that the substitute resolution uses the phrases with parents and family members. I feel like that is much more inclusive to all of the families that we have in our division, that many of our students are in homes with grandparents as the guardians, with foster parents, with godparents, with other relatives serving in that role. And so I wanted to take a moment to appreciate the inclusiveness of that, and to also appreciate our staff members who are using those inclusive phrases in their classroom, asking students to talk to their grown-ups at home, and not necessarily saying, take this home to mom and dad. That reinforces that void for students who are not going home to mom and dad. And so I personally appreciate when that inclusive phrase is used. I don't disagree with anything, particularly on the second resolution. I just don't love the phrasing that we're going to continue to. We're going to continue to. I would feel stronger support in saying that we're going to highlight new ways for things to be presented so that families are aware of it. That we're going to seek to broaden collaborations rather than continuing to. Ultimately, I mean, I could support this with without excitement. I think that in terms of resolutions, the goal is to recognize something that we are committed to doing. That's our goal when we read our resolution for teacher appreciation, for nurse appreciation. Those are things that we are already doing, but we are recognizing that we are recommitting to doing that. And given the current atmosphere in our city, I'm okay with recommitting and recognizing our commitment in these categories, but it doesn't excite me. So,
Mrs. Franklin, again, try to speak to the substitute, your comments.
To the substitute.
That's what's on the floor right now, the
Okay.
substitute.
Okay, well,
Mrs. Holtz?
The reason why a lot of people have been showing up here to complain about parental rights is they've been asked to come by a political action committee that has politicized this situation. They're given scripts, they read them to the board. I'm positive of that. They are not the majority. And on the first resolution,
We're speaking now to the substitute, Mrs. Holtz. That's the one on the floor
shall I
right now.
save this?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't mind repeating it.
Is it, without any further discussion, then we'll put the substitute up for a vote? All right, so the motion.
This is a vote. If you vote
On the substitute
on the substitute, this is
resolution.
a vote on the substitute,
Right.
correct?
Right, all right. So, all in favor, show a raised hand, please.
Madam Chair, we have 8 ayes.
All opposed, please show a raised hand. Oh,
And we have 2 nays.
no, let me announce again, all opposed, please. Are we done with our yays?
Yes.
Okay, so all opposed, please show a raised hand.
Okay, and we have 3 nays. So the substitute resolution did pass 7-3.
So back to the agenda. I believe that brings us to committee reports. Who would like to begin? Mrs. Franklin.
I did want to actually just recognize Kempsville High School for getting my son, who I was a very involved parent. I was the PTSA president, and I want to just say to Kempsville High School that I personally appreciate them getting my son through high school, because it was not me. I could have pushed as hard as I could, but you know, when you have multiple kids, they all have different skill levels and motivation levels. And so I personally do think that it's a collaboration, and that is the best way to get things done. So, because I definitely was not the only indicator for my son's success. Anyway, but with that said, I just want to give an update to the board. And this is in regards to the request for us to look at a student board member. And so Ms. Owens and I have been working, talking with different groups and collaborating with them. And so obviously, in fact, I even spoke to Mr. Edwards, who had worked very hard to work on that as well. And so his concern with one student board member is that it's a lot on that student's shoulders to have one person representing a whole student body. And I've heard that from a couple of different groups. Actually, the Human Rights Commission is also discussing student ambassadors and that sort of thing. So it's been interesting to kind of work collectively with that discussion and our discussion on the board level. So right now, I think where we're sitting as a proposal, but we're also going to go to an SEA meeting as well to get the students' voice in this, because we've been talking to some adults and their opinions. But I think that what we're leading towards is having possibly the SEA or one student representative be part of a board committee. Because one of the questions that we had at the Human Rights Commission level was, these students, what if they're out doing activities? I mean, this is an important position. It's not something to be taken lightly. And so what if they're out or they can't make it to multiple meetings because they're involved in a sport or activity? So I think that probably the best way to consider this moving forward is being able to have a student representative like they do for SEA in every high school, and then having them be part of a collective board committee where they're going to, some of the things that they're going to do is review the agendas and, discuss things that are important to the student body and bring it back to us, and then have one person, and we'll have a delegated time, maybe in our agenda where the student representative can come speak to us as a board and administration. But at least that it's not just on one shoulders. I think that it provides more diversity as well, because I think it would be very difficult for one student to speak for all the high schools. And so that's kind of where we're leaning right now. I just wanted to give an update. And like I said, Ms. Owens and I are going to also be speaking to SEA. But I just, if you have any feedback, we'd love to get your feedback based on where we are right now. But it is still moving forward. And so I just wanted to, again, thank you for your time for the update.
Yes, so thank you for clarifying that this is not a final report, and that hopefully, this gives you also the opportunity to have discussions with staff if you haven't yet, And I appreciate the outreach to the rest of our colleagues to certainly reach out to Ms. Owens or Mrs. Franklin with your input.
Well, it's definitely something that, is a work in art. So, I would love to get feedback as we're moving along in this discussion.
And
So.
Ms. Owens, do you have anything to add right now?
Just to throw in there that before bringing an actual proposal to the board, we really want to have the student voice. We heard students come and speak today saying how they felt decisions were made about them without them, and it defeats the purpose for us to come and do a proposal of how we think they should be represented without hearing how they feel like they should be represented, and then taking that into consideration within the proposal. So we're hoping to, next Wednesday, go to the citywide SCA and get their input.
And I would just ask that along the way you do integrate with the superintendent and see how this, whatever this is to ultimately be recommended, how it integrates with his existing superintendent, student, what do we call them again? Your own student advisory council. So I think that would be a prudent discussion to have as well with you ladies, with the superintendent. Okay, who's next on? Mrs. Felton.
Thank you, Chair Ryan. I'd just like to bring it to the board's attention that I did go to the VSBA executive meeting, and there was some language change within some of the policies of equity. I would ask, not to prolong tonight, but I would ask if anyone is interested in having a conversation with me, please call me and let me know, and we could talk about it. I was a little bit concerned about how they did it. And I think that the board should have gotten a little bit more input on that conversation about moving and changing language within some of the policies that we've already put forth. So, not to prolong the evening, and I want to get into a deeper dive, call me and we will have a conversation about it. Thank you so much.
Governance Committee, I will say it's not too early that we're already discussing retreat dates for next July. Our intent is to lock in the 2 dates for next July before the end of the year to give everybody plenty of notice on that. And we will, and one caveat I added was to not conflict with the VSBA Summer Annual Conference, which there was a conflict this year. So, there's not a whole lot of other choices, but we do have choices with certain weekdays and such. So we'll be getting back to you more on that.
This is right. I think you mentioned the governance that you wanted to confirm with the board. In June, there will be that extra special meeting, the first Tuesday in June, which I think is June 6th for the superintendent's evaluation. You just want to put that on the calendar now for people to start talking about.
Everybody heard that right. So these will be dates that'll be locked in for the January organization meeting when the schedule of meetings for the year is presented and voted on. So we're trying to just have more of a heads up on dates such as that weren't traditionally included in that original or that January calendar of meetings. Any other committee reports? I'm reminding my colleagues that we do have one more order of closed session business, so we will be returning to closed session, and we'll need a motion to read into closed.
Okay. I move that the school board recess into closed session in accordance with the exemptions to open meetings laws set forth in Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711, to deliberate on the following matters. A closed meeting pursuant to the exemptions from open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711, Part A, Paragraph 7, as amended. Consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual or probable litigation where such consultation or briefing in open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body. For the purposes of this subdivision, probable litigation means litigation that has been specifically threatened or on which the public body or its legal counsel has a reasonable basis to believe that will be commenced by or against any party. Nothing in this subdivision shall be construed to permit the closure of a meeting merely because an attorney representing the public body is in attendance or is consulted on a matter, namely to discuss pending litigation and new court decision.
All in favor, raised hand.
We have 8 ayes, so the motion did pass.
Okay, we need a few moments to transition.
Vote in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by this school board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the school board of the City of Virginia Beach hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered.
Motion to approve, Mrs. Anderson, a second. Mrs. Hughes, all in favor, show a raised hand.
We have 10 ayes, the motion did pass.
Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.